Close your eyes and let your mind drift to a time long ago, where the wind carried the soft clatter of hooves and the whispers of prayers from holy lands. This is the next chapter of our historical journey, where we'll explore new tales from the age of the Crusades, not the clamor of battles, but the quiet moments, the silent fates woven into history's fabric. Let my voice guide you through peaceful villages, dusty trails, and the dreams of those who lived centuries past. Breathe deeply, relax, and allow sleep to gently embrace you. 1. The tale of the old blacksmith in Antioch. The night draped Antioch in a velvet hush, the city nestled between rugged hills and the gentle murmur of the Orontes River. It was the year 1147, and the echoes of the Second Crusade lingered faintly on the horizon. A distant rumble of hooves and steel. But here, in this quiet corner of the world, time seemed to slow, cradled by the soft glow of a waning moon. The air carried the faint scent of charcoal and molten iron, a fragrance that had clung to Elias, the old blacksmith, for more than 40 years. His workshop, a humble stone hut with a sagging roof patched with dried reeds, stood at the edge of the town, its walls etched with the soot of countless fires. Elias was a man of few words, his hands calloused and rough as the bark of an ancient olive tree, his back bent from decades of bending over the forge. Tonight, he worked alone, the rhythmic clang of his hammer against the anvil a lullaby that drifted into the sleeping streets. The sound was steady, almost hypnotic, blending with the occasional rustle of leaves outside and the distant hoot of an owl perched in the branches. He was forging a sword, not for the war that raged beyond his walls, but for a promise, a silent vow etched into every strike of his hammer. His son, Matthias, had left 2 years ago, joining the Crusaders with eyes bright with dreams of glory. Elias had watched him go, his young face framed by the dawn light. And now, every night, he crafted a blade, imagining it as a gift for Matthias's return. The fire in the forge crackled softly, its embers casting shadows that danced across the stone walls like ghostly figures from a forgotten tale. Elias paused, wiping the sweat from his brow with a weathered hand, and gazed at the sword's unfinished edge. The steel gleamed faintly, catching the firelight, and he murmured to himself, "Soon, my boy, soon." His voice was a whisper, carried away by the night breeze that slipped through the cracks in the door. The wind rustled the olive trees outside, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he heard Matthias's laughter, a memory from summers past when they'd raced along the riverbank, their bare feet splashing in the cool water. The sound faded, leaving only the hum of the night, but it left a warmth in his chest. He set the hammer down and stoked the fire with a long iron rod, watching the flames leap and lick the air with a gentle fervor. The heat bathed his face, and his mind wandered to the stories Matthias used to tell, tales of knights in shining armor, their banners fluttering in the breeze, and of distant lands where the sun painted the deserts gold. Elias had never cared for war, his heart belonged to the forge, to the steady heat that transformed raw metal into something beautiful, something enduring. Yet, he understood his son's longing for adventure, a call that had pulled him away from this humble life of soot and sweat. He wondered if Matthias still carried the small iron cross Elias had forged for him, a token pressed into his hand the day he left. The hours slipped by, marked only by the soft drip of water from a crack in the roof, each drop a quiet percussion against the stone floor. Elias's eyes grew heavy, the weight of the day pulling at him, but he resisted sleep. He feared the dreams might bring news of Matthias's fate, news he wasn't sure he could bear. Instead, he focused on the sword, its blade taking shape under his careful hands. He pictured Matthias holding it, strong and proud, returning to Antioch with tales of his own, of starry nights in foreign camps, of the sea's endless whisper on a ship's deck. The thought warmed him more than the fire ever could, an ember of hope glowing in the quiet. Outside, the stars blinked above the city, their light filtering through the workshop's small, grimy window. A night owl hooted softly, its call blending with the distant bleat of a goat tethered near a neighbor's hut. Elias leaned back in his wooden chair, its creaks a familiar melody, and let the sounds wrap around him like a blanket. He imagined Matthias sitting beside him, the two of them laughing over a simple meal of bread and olives, the table lit by a single candle. The vision was so clear he could almost smell the bread baking in the morning. its yeasty aroma mingling with the olive oil drizzled from a clay jug. He could see Matthias's grin, hear the boy's voice recounting a day spent fishing, the river sparkling under the sun. The forge's heat began to wane, and Elias added another log, the crackle a gentle rhythm that synced with his slowing heartbeat. He thought of the river, its waters reflecting the moon in silver ripples, and how he and Matthias used to fish there, their lines cast into the stillness. They'd sit for hours, the silence broken only by the plop of a fish or the rustle of reeds in the breeze. The memory brought a faint smile to his lips, softening the lines etched into his face by time and toil. He wondered if Matthias saw the same moon tonight, wherever he was. Perhaps in some distant camp where the fires burned low. Or maybe on a ship crossing the restless sea, the waves lapping against the hull. As the night deepened, Elias's movements slowed, his hands moving with the care of a man who knew every inch of his craft. The sword was nearly complete, its edge sharp and gleaming, its hilt wrapped in leather he'd softened with his own hands, rubbed with oil until it was supple as a newborn's skin. He ran his fingers along the blade, feeling the cool steel, and whispered a prayer for his son's safety. The prayer was simple, born of a father's love. Its words carried on the breeze that slipped through the window, mingling with the night's quiet song. "Keep him safe," he murmured. "Bring him home to me." The owl called again, closer now, its hoot a soft echo in the darkness. Elias's eyelids drooped, the weight of the day and the warmth of the forge pulling him toward rest. He pictured Matthias walking through the workshop door, the sword in his hand, a grin lighting his face. The image was a comfort, a thread of hope in the uncertainty of war, and it lingered as he slumped in his chair, the hammer resting beside him, its handle worn smooth by years of use. The fire dwindled to embers, casting a warm, golden glow over the old man, illuminating the lines of his face and the silver in his hair. Sleep came gently, like the river's flow, carrying Elias into a dream where the clang of the forge turned into Matthias's voice, calling him home. He saw his son standing in the doorway, the sword at his side, the iron cross glinting at his chest, the workshop filled with laughter, the scent of bread, and the rustle of leaves. A world untouched by the chaos beyond. The night held him close, the owl's call fading into the distance. And for a while, the world was at peace. The embers glowed softly, a silent witness to a father's love. As Elias drifted deeper into the embrace of sleep, the sword unfinished but the dream complete. 2. The journey of the shepherd girl in Jerusalem. The evening draped Jerusalem in a soft purple veil as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the rocky hillsides. It was the year 1187, and the air hummed with the distant chants of pilgrims winding through the city's narrow streets. Their voices a gentle murmur carried on the breeze. On the outskirts, where the land stretched into rolling pastures dotted with sheep, lived Amina, a young shepherd girl of 12 summers. Her days were spent tending her small flock, her bare feet tracing familiar paths through the grass, her heart attuned to the quiet rhythm of the land. Tonight, the sky was clear, a canvas of fading gold and deepening blue, pierced by the first shy stars. Amina sat on a flat stone, her woolen shawl pulled tight against the cooling air, watching her sheep graze contentedly. The bleating of a lamb mingled with the rustle of olive leaves, and the distant call of a nightjar added a soothing note to the stillness. As she shifted her weight, her hand brushed against something cold and smooth buried in the dirt. Curious, she dug with her fingers, unearthing a small, tarnished necklace, a delicate chain holding a pendant shaped like a crescent moon, its edges worn but still glinting faintly in the twilight. Amina held it up, the metal cool against her palm, and felt a strange pull, as if the pendant whispered secrets from a time long past. She closed her eyes, letting the sounds of the evening, the soft bleat of sheep, the whisper of wind through the grass, wash over her. In her mind, a vision began to form, and she imagined the necklace's owner, a woman from the days of the Crusades, perhaps a wife left behind when her husband marched to war. The vision took shape slowly, like a tapestry unfolding. Amina saw a woman named Layla, with dark hair woven into a braid, standing on this very hill a century ago. Layla's husband, a crusader named Yusuf, had joined the First Crusade, leaving her with a promise to return. The necklace, Amina imagined, was a gift from him, forged by a traveling smith and given on the eve of his departure. Layla wore it every day. Its crescent moon a symbol of hope. A reminder of the nights they'd spent under the same stars. Amina's breath slowed as she pictured Layla sitting where she sat now. Her hands busy with a spindle. The wool from her own sheep twisting into thread. The air carried the scent of wild thyme. And the distant clang of a bell from the city marked the hour of prayer. Layla's eyes, Amina thought, must have been filled with longing as she watched the horizon, waiting for Yusuf's return. The girl's imagination painted the scene with tender detail, the way Layla's shawl fluttered in the breeze. The soft glow of a lantern she carried as dusk fell. The quiet hum of a lullaby she sang to calm her restless heart. Days turned to weeks in Amina's mind, and Layla's weight stretched on. The necklace became her companion, its weight a comfort against her chest. Amina imagined the woman tracing its edges with her thumb, whispering prayers for Yusuf's safety as the sounds of battle grew closer, the faint clash of steel. The rumble of hooves. One evening, a messenger arrived, his face weary, his news grim. Yusuf had fallen in a skirmish near Ascalon, his body lost to the sands. Layla's cry echoed in Amina's vision, a sound swallowed by the wind, and the girl felt a pang of sorrow, as if she'd known the woman herself. But the story didn't end there. Amina's gentle heart wove a thread of resilience into Layla's tale. The woman rose each morning, tending her sheep, spinning her wool, the necklace still around her neck. She planted a small olive tree near the stone where Amina now sat, its roots a symbol of her enduring strength. Years passed, and Layla's hair turned silver, but she never removed the pendant, its crescent moon a quiet testament to love and loss. When her time came, she was buried beneath that tree, the necklace placed in her hands, destined to wait in the earth until Amina found it. The vision faded, leaving Amina with the real necklace in her grasp, its cool metal now warm from her touch. The night had deepened, the stars above twinkling like scattered jewels. A sheep nuzzled her leg, its wool soft against her skin, and she smiled, feeling a connection to Layla across the centuries. She wondered if the woman's spirit lingered here, watching over the hills, her presence in the rustle of leaves or the sigh of the wind. Amina slipped the necklace over her head, the pendant resting against her chest, and lay back on the grass. The earth beneath her was cool, the scent of soil and thyme filling her senses. She listened to the night sounds, the distant bark of a dog in the city, the gentle rustle of her flock settling down, the occasional hoot of an owl perched in a nearby cypress. Her eyelids grew heavy, and she imagined Layla's voice, soft and melodic, telling her own story under the same sky. In her half-dream state, Amina saw the olive tree grow tall, its branches spreading wide, offering shade to generations of shepherds. She saw Layla smiling, her braid now white, sitting beside the tree with a spindle in hand, the necklace glinting in the sunlight. The vision shifted to Yusuf, his spirit returning not in battle but in peace, joining Layla under the tree's canopy. They sat together, their hands entwined, the crescent moon pendant hanging between them, a bridge between worlds. The girl's breathing slowed, matching the gentle rise and fall of the land. She pictured the sheep grazing peacefully, their bells chiming softly, a lullaby woven into the night. The stars seemed to pulse, each one a memory of Layla's life, and Amina felt a warmth spread through her, as if the woman's strength had passed into her. The wind carried a faint whisper, perhaps Layla's voice, perhaps just the breath of the earth, and Amina let it guide her deeper into sleep. In her dream, she walked with Layla along the hillside, the sheep trailing behind, the necklace swinging lightly with each step. They paused by the olive tree, its leaves rustling in approval, and Layla placed a hand on Amina's shoulder. "Keep my story alive," she seemed to say, her voice a gentle echo. Amina nodded, her heart full, and the dream softened into a haze of golden light, the hill fading into the quiet of night. The flock slept around her, their breathing a steady rhythm, and the city's lights twinkled in the distance, a reminder of life beyond the pasture. Amina's hand rested on the necklace, its crescent moon a silent guardian, and she drifted further, the boundary between waking and dreaming blurring. The owl hooted again, a soft farewell, and the stars watched over her, their light a gentle embrace as sleep claimed her fully. 3. A rainy night in Acre Castle. The rain fell softly over Acre, a steady patter against the stone walls of the castle that had stood for centuries, weathered by sieges and storms alike. It was the year 1191, and the Third Crusade had brought a restless energy to the coastal city, its harbor alive with the creak of ships and the murmur of soldiers. But within the shadowed halls of the castle, a quiet reigned, broken only by the gentle drip of water through a crack in the ceiling. Sir Baldwin, an old knight with silver hair and a face etched by time, sat by a narrow window, his gnarled hands resting on the sill. Beside him perched his only companion, a tabby cat named Mira, her green eyes glinting in the candlelight. The evening had turned the sky a deep gray, the rain weaving a curtain that softened the world beyond the window. Baldwin leaned back in his wooden chair, its creaks blending with the rain's rhythm, and gazed at the stars peeking through the clouds. The castle, once a bustling stronghold, now held only echoes of its past glory, its corridors silent save for the occasional scurrying of a mouse. Baldwin had served here in his youth, his armor gleaming under the sun. But now, at 70 years, he found peace in the stillness, his sword long retired to a corner, its blade dulled by rust. Mira purred softly, curling against his leg, her warmth a comfort against the damp air. Baldwin smiled, his voice a low rumble as he began to speak, more to the cat than to himself. "Do you see those stars, Mira? They've guided me through many a night, long before this rain washed the world clean." His words were slow, measured, carrying the weight of memories as he traced the constellations with a trembling finger. The rain tapped against the stone, a gentle lullaby, and he let his mind drift to the tales those stars held. He spoke of a night decades ago, when he was a young knight under the command of King Richard. The sky had been clear then, the stars a bright canopy over a camp near Jaffa. Baldwin remembered the crackle of the fire, the scent of burning cedar, and the laughter of his comrades as they shared stories. One star, brighter than the rest, had caught his eye, a guide, he'd thought, leading them toward victory. He told Mira how he'd followed that star, his horse's hooves thudding against the earth, the air filled with the salt of the sea and the promise of dawn. The rain grew heavier, a soft cascade that muffled the world outside, and Baldwin's voice softened further. He recounted a tale of a quiet night after a battle, when the stars seemed to weep with the wounded. He'd sat alone then, his shield cracked, his armor heavy with mud, and looked to the sky for solace. A single star had pulsed, and in its light, he'd seen the face of his mother, her voice calling him home. Myra's purr deepened, her eyes half closed, and Baldwin stroked her fur, the motion as rhythmic as the rain. He shifted in his chair, the wood groaning under his weight, and spoke of another memory, a night when the stars led a lost patrol back to Acre. The rain had fallen then too, a storm that blinded their path, but the constellations had pierced the darkness, their light a beacon. Baldwin had ridden at the front, his voice hoarse from shouting orders, his heart steady with the knowledge that the stars never faltered. When they reached the castle gates, the men had cheered, their wet cloaks steaming by the fire, and Baldwin had felt a pride that warmed him even now. The candle flickered, casting shadows that danced on the walls, and Baldwin's eyes grew distant. He told Mira of a star he'd named for his lost brother, a young squire who'd fallen in a skirmish near Tyre. The star shone faintly, a quiet presence among the brighter lights, and Baldwin often wondered if it watched over him still. He imagined his brother riding beside him on those starry nights, his laughter mingling with the wind, his spirit unbroken by the war that had taken him. The rain pattered on, a steady heartbeat, and Mira nestled closer, her warmth grounding him in the present. Outside, the storm softened, the rain turning to a gentle drizzle, and Baldwin's voice took on a dreamlike quality. He spoke of a night when the stars seemed to sing, their light reflecting off the sea as the crusaders sailed toward Acre. The waves had lapped against the hull, a soothing rhythm, and Baldwin had stood at the prow, his cloak billowing, his heart lifted by the celestial choir. He'd prayed then, a simple plea for peace, and the stars had answered with their silent glow, guiding him to safety. The old knight's hands rested on Myra's back, his fingers tracing her stripes, and he recounted a final tale, a night when the stars led him to a hidden spring during a drought. The land had been parched, the sheep bleating weakly, and Baldwin, weary from patrol, had followed a lone star to a grove where water bubbled from the earth. The coolness had revived him. The sound of the spring, a melody that lingered in his memory. He'd sat there, the star above, and felt a connection to something greater. A peace that war could not touch. The candle burned low, its flame a tiny beacon in the dim room. And Baldwin's eyelids grew heavy. The rain had stopped, leaving only the drip of water from the eaves. A soft percussion against the silence. He looked at the stars once more, their light filtering through the window, and whispered to Mira, "They've seen it all, haven't they?" The cat purred, her eyes closing fully, and Baldwin felt the weight of the day lift, replaced by a gentle drowsiness. In his mind, the stars wove a tapestry of those nights, Jaffa's firelit camp, the weeping sky after battle, the lost patrol's return, his brother's star, the singing sea, the hidden spring. Each memory was a thread, soft and warm, drawing him into a dream where he rode again under that celestial guide. Mira at his side, the rain a distant memory. The castle walls faded, the chairs softened into grass, and the stars pulsed above, their light a cradle for his sleep. The night deepened, the drip of water slowing to a rare drop, and Baldwin's breathing matched the quiet. The stars watched over him, their glow a silent promise, and Mira's purr became the heartbeat of his dream. The world outside slept, the castle stood still, and the old night drifted into a peace as enduring as the heavens above. 4. The baker's secret in Damascus. The night settled over Damascus like a soft blanket, the city's ancient walls glowing faintly under the silver light of a crescent moon. It was the year 1148, and the distant echoes of the Second Crusade lingered in the air. A faint tremor beneath the city's usual hum of life. Within a modest bakery near the bustling souk, the scent of warm bread and rising dough filled the air, a comforting aroma that wrapped around everything like a hug. Khalil, an aging baker with flour-dusted hands and a gentle smile, worked late into the evening, his movements slow and deliberate as he kneaded the last batch of dough for the morning. The bakery was a small, stone-walled room with a low ceiling, its shelves lined with loaves cooling under linen cloths. A single oil lamp flickered on the table, casting a warm, golden glow that danced across the walls, mingling with the shadows of drying herbs hanging from the rafters. Outside, the night was quiet save for the occasional rustle of palm leaves and the distant call of a muezzin, his voice weaving through the stillness like a thread of silk. Khalil hummed softly to himself, a tune his mother had taught him as a boy, the melody as familiar as the feel of dough beneath his fingers. As he worked, the door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside, a traveling merchant, his robes dusty from the road, his face lined with the weariness of a long journey. He carried a small leather pouch, its contents clinking faintly, and greeted Khalil with a nod. "Peace be upon you, old friend," the merchant said, his voice rough but kind. "I bring a gift from the spice markets of Aleppo." Intrigued, Khalil wiped his hands on his apron and invited the man to sit, offering a cup of mint tea from a clay pot warming by the hearth. The merchant opened the pouch, revealing a blend of spices, cinnamon, cardamom, and a hint of something exotic, perhaps saffron or clove, its aroma rising like a memory from distant lands. "This," the merchant explained, "is a recipe from before the wars, passed down by a baker who fled the chaos. It will make your bread sing." Khalil's eyes widened, and he accepted the gift with a grateful nod, his mind already imagining the flavors dancing on the tongue. The merchant stayed only long enough to share a loaf and a story of his travels, then slipped back into the night, leaving Khalil alone with his new treasure. The baker returned to his work, the dough soft and pliable under his hands, and decided to experiment. He sprinkled the spice blend into a small portion, kneading it gently, the scent rising with each fold. The kitchen filled with a warm, spicy aroma, a contrast to the usual plain bread he baked for the townsfolk. As he shaped the dough into rounds and placed them in the oven, the heat enveloped the room, the crackle of the fire a gentle lullaby. He sat by the oven, watching the loaves rise, his mind drifting to a time before the Crusades, when Damascus had thrived in peace. Khalil's thoughts wandered to his youth, when the souk had been alive with laughter and the clink of coins, the air thick with the scent of saffron and rosewater. He remembered his father, a baker too, teaching him to judge the dough by its feel, to listen for the oven's sigh when the bread was done. Those days seemed distant now, shadowed by the unrest that had brought soldiers and strangers to their gates. Yet tonight, with the spice blend in his hands, Khalil felt a flicker of that old prosperity. A whisper of hope baked into every loaf. The oven's warmth spread through the room, and Khalil leaned back against the wall, the stone cool against his shoulders. The rain began to fall outside, a soft patter against the roof, blending with the crackling fire. He closed his eyes, letting the sounds wash over him, the drip of water into a bucket, the faint whistle of wind through a crack in the window, the gentle rise of the dough within the oven. In his mind, he saw the merchant's journey, the dusty roads from Aleppo, the markets where spices were traded under starlit skies, and the hands that had mixed this blend before war tore them apart. As the bread baked, the aroma grew richer, filling the bakery with a warmth that seemed to chase away the night's chill. Khalil opened the oven door, the heat brushing his face, and pulled out the loaves, their golden crusts glistening with a hint of spice. He broke one open, the steam rising, and took a small bite. The flavor was unlike anything he'd known, sweet, warm, and layered with history, a taste of peace from a time before the Crusades. Tears pricked his eyes, not from the heat but from the memory it evoked, and he smiled, knowing he'd found something special. He set the loaf aside to cool, wrapping it in a cloth, and sat by the table, the lamp's light softening the room's edges. The rain continued its gentle song, and Khalil's thoughts turned to the townsfolk who would wake to this bread. He imagined their faces, children with sticky fingers, elders nodding in approval, merchants pausing in their haste to savor a bite. The spice blend, he decided, would be his secret, a gift to share in small measures, a way to bring a taste of the past into their uncertain present. The night deepened, the rain slowing to a drizzle, and Khalil's eyelids grew heavy. He pictured the merchant traveling onward, the pouch of spices a beacon of hope, and wondered if others would find such treasures in the chaos. The fire dwindled to embers, casting a soft glow over the cooling loaves, and the bakery settled into a quiet peace. Mira, the merchant's cat who'd lingered behind, jumped onto the table, her purr a gentle vibration against the wood. Khalil stroked her fur, the motion soothing, and felt the weight of the day lift. In his half-dream state, he saw the souk as it once was, stalls brimming with goods, the air filled with laughter, the scent of his spiced bread wafting through the crowd. He saw his father smiling, his hands guiding Khalil's through the dough, and the merchant returning with tales of distant lands. The vision was warm, a cocoon of memory, and Khalil let it carry him deeper. The rain's final drops tapped against the roof, a farewell to the night, and the embers glowed like tiny stars. Watching over him, sleep came gently, like the rise of the dough, enveloping Khalil in a dream where the bakery thrived. The spice blend, a legacy passed down through generations. The loaves cooled on the table, their aroma a silent promise, and Mira curled beside him, her purr blending with the night's quiet song. The city slept beyond the walls, the crescent moon casting its light through the window, and Khalil drifted into a peace as rich as the bread he'd baked. 5. The small boat on the Jordan River. The evening settled over the Jordan River like a quiet sigh, the water reflecting the soft amber of a setting sun on this Tuesday, June 17, 2025, though in the mind of Elias, the old fisherman, it was the year 1150, a time when the Second Crusade cast its shadow across the land. The riverbank was a haven of peace, its banks lined with reeds that swayed gently in the breeze, their rustling a lullaby to the world. Elias sat in his small wooden boat, its hull weathered by years of gentle currents, the oars resting idle in his gnarled hands. The air carried the scent of damp earth and wild mint, a fragrance that had been his companion since boyhood. Elias was 78, his hair a thin crown of silver, his face etched with lines that told of a life spent on the water. His boat, barely wide enough for two, rocked softly with the river's flow, its creaks blending with the distant call of a heron wading in the shallows. The world beyond the river, the clatter of hooves, the shouts of crusaders, felt far away, a distant dream he chose to ignore. Tonight, the sky was clear, the first stars twinkling above, and Elias let his mind drift to the calm days of his youth. Before war had touched this sacred waterway, he leaned back against the boat's worn seat, the wood smooth under his palms, and closed his eyes. The gentle lap of water against the hull was a rhythm he'd known all his life. A heartbeat that steadied him. In his memory, he saw himself as a boy, no more than 10, fishing with his father under a sky much like this one. The river had been their sanctuary. Its surface a mirror for the stars. Its banks alive with the chirp of crickets and the occasional splash of a fish. They'd cast their nets in silence. The only sound the soft thud of the oars and the hum of a tune his father would whistle. A melody lost to time but etched in Elias's heart. The boat rocked gently, and Elias's thoughts turned to a summer day long ago, when the river had shimmered with heat, the air thick with the buzz of dragonflies. He'd lain back then, as he did now, watching clouds drift like ships across the sky. His father had taught him to read the weather in those clouds, to feel the winds whisper before a storm. They'd caught a basket of tilapia that day, their scales glinting like silver coins, and eaten them by the fire, the smoke curling upward to join the stars. The memory brought a faint smile to Elias's lips, the taste of grilled fish lingering like a ghost on his tongue. The night deepened, the stars multiplying above, their light dancing on the water's surface. Elias opened his eyes, gazing at the reflection, and recalled a quiet evening when he'd taken his own son, Jacob, out on the boat. Jacob had been 6, his small hands eager to hold the net, his laughter ringing out as a fish flopped into the boat. The river had been calm then, its flow a gentle cradle, and Elias had taught Jacob to steer. The boy's face alight with wonder. Those days had been before the Crusades, before Jacob had grown and joined a caravan, leaving Elias with only the river for company. A soft breeze stirred the reeds, and Elias's hands rested on the oars, their weight a comfort. He remembered a night when the moon had been full, its light turning the Jordan into a ribbon of silver. He'd floated alone then, the boat drifting with the current, and listened to the night sounds, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of a fox along the bank, the gentle splash of a turtle slipping into the water. The world had felt whole, untouched by the chaos that would soon follow, and Elias had felt a deep peace, as if the river itself held his soul. The boat rocked again, a slight tilt that mirrored the sway of his memories, and Elias's mind drifted to a winter day when the river had frozen at its edges, the ice crackling under his boots. He'd walked along the bank, the boat tethered behind him, and marveled at the stillness. The air had been crisp, the scent of pine from the distant hills mingling with the river's earthy breath. He'd sat by a fire that night, the flames reflecting off the ice, and dreamed of spring, when the water would flow again, carrying his boat back to life. The stars above seemed to pulse, their light a gentle guide, and Elias's breathing slowed, matching the river's rhythm. He thought of the crusaders who'd passed this way, their banners fluttering, their voices raised in song or battle cry. But the river had remained, a constant amid the change, its waters washing away the blood and dust. Elias had watched from his boat, a silent witness, and found solace in its indifference, its steady flow a reminder of life beyond war. The night grew cooler, the breeze carrying a hint of dew, and Elias pulled his cloak tighter around his shoulders. He pictured Jacob returning, his son's face weathered but smiling, stepping into the boat to fish as they once had. The vision was a thread of hope, woven into the quiet, and Elias let it linger, the boat rocking gently as if nodding in agreement. He imagined the net filling with fish, the fire crackling on the bank, the stars watching over them as they ate together, the river's song their only companion. The heron called again, its cry a soft echo across the water, and Elias's eyelids grew heavy. He leaned back, the boat's motion a cradle, and listened to the night, the drip of water from an oar, the rustle of reeds, the faint hum of a fish breaking the surface. In his half-dream state, he saw the river as it had been, a ribbon of peace threading through the land, its banks lined with olive trees and wildflowers. He saw his father and Jacob beside him, their faces lit by the fire, their laughter blending with the water's flow. Sleep came gently, like the river's current, carrying Elias into a dream where the boat drifted endlessly, the stars above a canopy of light. The Jordan flowed around him, its waters warm and inviting, and he felt the presence of those he'd loved, his father's steady hand, Jacob's eager grin, the heron's silent flight. The boat rocked on, a tiny arc of memory, and the night held him close, the river's song a lullaby that faded into the stillness. 6. The storyteller under the olive tree. The night unfurled over the village like a silken shawl, the air cool and fragrant with the scent of olive blossoms and dry earth. It was the year 1189, and the distant hum of the Third Crusade whispered through the hills surrounding the small settlement near the edge of the desert. Beneath a gnarled olive tree, its branches heavy with silver-green leaves, sat Yusuf, an old storyteller whose voice had lulled generations to sleep. The tree stood as a sentinel on the village outskirts, its roots deep in the soil, offering shade even under the moon's gentle glow. Around him gathered a circle of children, their eyes wide with wonder, their breaths soft in the stillness. The hour was late, the village quiet save for the occasional bark of a dog and the rustle of leaves stirred by a desert breeze. The sky above was a tapestry of stars, their light filtering through the olive branches, casting dappled patterns on the ground. Yusuf, his face lined with the wisdom of 70 years, wore a simple robe of faded brown, his hands resting on a staff worn smooth by time. A small fire crackled at his feet, its flames licking the air with a warm, golden hue, the smoke curling upward like a prayer. The children nestled closer, their woolen blankets pulled tight, waiting for the tale he would spin tonight. Yusuf cleared his throat, his voice a low, melodic hum that seemed to blend with the night's quiet song. Long ago, he began, when the sands stretched endless and the stars were young, a spirit roamed this desert, a guardian of the lost. They called her Zainab. His words flowed slowly, each syllable a brushstroke on the canvas of their imaginations. He described Zainab as a figure of light, her form shimmering like the heat waves that danced over the dunes, her eyes the color of the evening sky. The children leaned in, their breaths held, as the fire's crackle punctuated his tale. He told of a time when a caravan had vanished in a sandstorm, their camels swallowed by the swirling dust, their cries lost to the wind. Zainab, he said, had appeared to a young boy left behind, her voice a whisper on the breeze, guiding him to a hidden oasis where water bubbled from the earth. The boy had survived, returning to tell of the spirit's kindness, her light leading him through the darkness. Yusuf's hands moved as he spoke, tracing the shape of dunes in the air, his staff tapping the ground to mimic the camel's tread. The night deepened, the stars growing brighter, and Yusuf wove another thread into the story. He spoke of a weary traveler, a man fleeing the chaos of the Crusades, who had stumbled into the desert with no hope left. Zainab had found him, her form a beacon against the night, and led him to a cave where ancient carvings told of peace. The traveler had rested there, the spirit's presence a comfort, and emerged days later with a renewed heart, carrying tales of her grace. The children's eyes reflected the firelight, their imaginations painting Zainab's ethereal figure against the starry sky. A gentle wind stirred the olive leaves, and Yusuf's voice softened, lulling the listeners further. He recounted a night when Zainab had saved a shepherd, his flock scattered by raiders. The spirit had sung a melody, her voice weaving through the air like the wind through reeds, calling the sheep back to safety. The shepherd had fallen asleep to that song, waking to find his flock gathered, Zainab's light fading into the dawn. The old man's words painted the scene with care, the bleating of lambs, the rustle of grass, the soft glow of morning, drawing the children into a world of quiet wonder. The fire dwindled to embers, its warmth a gentle embrace, and Yusuf's tale turned to a personal memory. He spoke of his own youth, when he'd wandered too far into the desert, a boy of 12 with a heart full of dreams. A sandstorm had risen, blinding him, and he'd feared he'd never see his village again. Then, he said, Zainab had come, her light a guide through the haze, leading him to the olive tree where he now sat. Her voice had been a whisper, promising safety, and he'd returned home, the tale burning in his memory like a star. The children's eyelids grew heavy, their heads resting on their blankets, and Yusuf's voice became a lullaby. He described Zainab's dance under the stars, her form twirling with the wind, her light weaving patterns in the sand. She watched over the village, he said, her spirit in the rustle of leaves, the call of the nightjar, the glow of the fire. The old man's hands stilled, his staff leaning against the tree, and he gazed at the sky, the stars seeming to nod in agreement with his tale. The night wrapped around them, the embers glowing like tiny suns, and Yusuf's words slowed to a whisper. He spoke of a promise Zainab had made, to return whenever the village needed her, her light a beacon in dark times. The children's breathing deepened, their dreams filling with the desert spirit. Her song a thread in their sleep. Yusuf leaned back against the tree, its bark cool against his back, and felt the weight of the day lift. The fire's last flicker a companion in the quiet. In his half-dream state, he saw Zainab standing before him, her form a shimmer of light, her eyes kind. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch a breeze, and whispered thanks for keeping her story alive. The olive tree grew taller in his vision, its branches spreading to shelter the village, the stars above singing her melody. The children slept around him, their faces peaceful, and Yusuf felt a connection to the past, a thread of peace woven through the years. Sleep came gently, like the rustle of leaves, carrying Yusuf into a dream where he walked with Zainab across the desert. The sand soft under his feet, the stars a canopy above. The village faded, the tree remained, and the Spirit's light guided him to a place of eternal calm. The night held him close, the embers cooling to ash, and the olive tree stood watch, its leaves whispering Zainab's song into the stillness. 7. The wind over Galilee hills. The evening draped the Galilee hills in a tender hush, the sky transitioning from the warm orange of sunset to the deep indigo of night on this Tuesday, June 17, 2025, though in the heart of Amos, a shepherd of 60 years. It was the year 1190, a time when the Third Crusade stirred the lands with its distant echoes. The hills rolled gently around him, their slopes covered in patches of wild thyme and scattered olive trees, their leaves rustling softly in the cooling breeze. Amos sat on a flat rock, his staff resting across his knees, watching his small flock of sheep settle for the night. The air carried the earthy scent of grass and the faint tang of sheep's wool, a fragrance that had been his companion for decades. The day had been long, the sun beating down on the hills until it dipped below the horizon, leaving a golden afterglow. Now, as the first stars blinked into view, a gentle wind swept through, stirring the grasses and carrying a sound that caught Amos's ear, a distant, melodic hum, as if the air itself were singing. He tilted his head, his gray beard catching the breeze, and listened closely. The tune was faint, woven with the rustle of leaves and the bleating of a lamb, but it stirred something deep within him, a memory of a dance he'd heard tales of as a boy. Amos closed his eyes, letting the wind wash over him, its touch cool against his weathered skin. In his mind, the melody grew clearer, and he imagined an ancient dance from a time before the Crusades, when the hills had been alive with celebration. He pictured a circle of villagers, their robes flowing as they moved to the rhythm, their feet tracing patterns in the dust under a moonlit sky. The song, he thought, must have been sung by their ancestors, a hymn to the land, passed down through generations until war silenced it. The wind seemed to carry that lost melody, a thread of the past drifting over the hills. The sheep around him grew still, their breathing a soft counterpoint to the wind's song. And Amos's thoughts drifted to his youth. He remembered his grandfather, a man with hands like leather and a voice like honey, sitting by the fire and telling of a festival held in these hills. The dance, he'd said, was a celebration of the harvest, the villagers twirling with baskets of grain, their laughter mingling with the music. Amos had never seen it himself, but the story had painted a vivid picture: women with veils fluttering, men with staffs tapping the beat, the air filled with the scent of bread and wine. The wind strengthened slightly, carrying the hum higher, and Amos's imagination took flight. He saw a young woman leading the dance, her movements graceful as a gazelle, her voice rising with the melody. The villagers joined her, their steps a weave of joy, the hills echoing with their song. The stars above seemed to pulse in time, their light a witness to the celebration. And Amos felt a pang of longing for a peace he'd never known. The Crusades had brought soldiers and strife, their banners casting shadows over these hills. But the wind held the memory of that ancient harmony. He shifted on the rock, the stone cool beneath him, and listened as the melody wove through the night sounds, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of a fox in the underbrush, the gentle trickle of a stream nearby. In his mind, the dance continued, the villagers forming a spiral, their hands linked, their voices rising in a chorus that blended with the wind. He imagined an old man playing a flute, its notes sharp and sweet, guiding the rhythm, while children clapped and laughed, their small feet mimicking the adults. The scene was bathed in moonlight. The hills a stage for a performance lost to time. The flock shifted, a lamb nuzzling closer, its wool soft against his leg, and Amos's breathing slowed, matching the wind's gentle cadence. He pictured the dance ending, the villagers sitting under the stars, sharing bread and stories, the melody fading into a contented silence. The wind carried that silence now, a whisper of peace, and Amos felt a connection to those who'd come before. He wondered if the song had been silenced by war, its dancers scattered, their voices carried away by the same breeze that now brushed his face. The night deepened, the stars multiplying above, their light reflecting off the dew-kissed grass. Amos leaned back against the rock, his staff slipping to the ground, and let the wind's song lull him further. He imagined the young woman from his vision, her dance frozen in time, her spirit lingering in the hills. Perhaps, he thought, she sang still, her voice a thread in the wind, calling to those who listened. The sheep settled around him, their breathing a soft chorus, and the melody seemed to weave through their wool, a blanket of sound. In his half-dream state, Amos saw the dance resume, the villagers reappearing under the olive trees, their robes glowing in the starlight. The young woman smiled at him, her hand outstretched, and he felt a pull to join her, his old legs finding strength. The flute played again, the rhythm slow and soothing, and the hills echoed with the song, a harmony that wrapped around him like a shawl. The crusades faded, the soldiers' shouts replaced by laughter, and the land breathed with life once more. The wind softened, a gentle caress, and Amos's eyelids grew heavy. He pictured the dance ending, the villagers fading into the night, the young woman's voice lingering as a farewell. The sheep slept around him, their forms a circle of warmth, and the stars watched over the scene, their light a silent approval. He felt the rock beneath him, the grass against his hands, and the wind's song became a lullaby, guiding him deeper into rest. Sleep came gently, like the breeze across the hills, carrying Amos into a dream where he danced with the villagers, his staff a rhythm stick, his voice joining the melody. The Galilee hills stretched around him, their slopes alive with the ancient song, the olive trees swaying in time. The young woman led him, her light a guide, and the night held him close, the wind whispering her tune into his sleep. The flock slept on, the stars pulsed above, and the hills cradled him in a peace as old as the land itself. 8. The gatekeeper of Jaffa. The night cloaked Jaffa in a serene stillness. The hour nearing 9:09 p.m. on this imagined evening in the year 1191. When the Third Crusade cast its restless shadow over the coastal city. The moon hung low, a silver disk casting a gentle glow over the stone walls and the quiet harbor beyond. At the city's eastern gate, where the road from Jerusalem met the sea, stood Eli, an aging gatekeeper whose years numbered 65. His post was a small alcove in the wall, its bench worn smooth by time, and tonight, he leaned against the cool stone, his spear resting idly by his side. The air carried the salty tang of the sea and the faint scent of jasmine from a nearby garden, a fragrance that stirred memories long held in his heart. The day had been long, the sun beating down on the gate as merchants and pilgrims passed through, their voices a hum that faded with the dusk. Now, the city slept, the only sounds the soft lapping of waves against the shore and the occasional creak of a cartwheel in the distance. Eli's cloak, patched and faded, hung loosely over his shoulders, and his gray hair caught the moonlight as he gazed upward. The stars twinkled above, their light a quiet companion, and he felt the weight of his years settle into a peaceful stillness. His duty was simple, to watch the gate, to ensure the city's safety, but tonight, his mind wandered to the family he'd left behind in the hills. He closed his eyes, the cool night air brushing his face, and let the moonlight guide his thoughts. He saw his wife, Miriam, her dark hair woven with threads of silver, her laughter a melody that had filled their small home. They'd had 2 children, Leah, with her bright eyes and quick smile, and Daniel, whose hands had been eager to learn the shepherd's trade. Eli remembered the mornings when he'd leave for his post, the scent of freshly baked flatbread lingering as Miriam pressed a loaf into his hands. The children would wave from the doorway, their voices calling after him, a sound that had carried him through the day. The wind sighed through the gate, carrying the distant bleat of a goat from the hills, and Eli's memories deepened. He recalled a spring evening years ago, before the Crusades had brought war to their doorstep, when the family had gathered under a fig tree. The air had been sweet with blossoms, the ground soft with new grass, and they'd shared a meal of olives and cheese, the children's laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves. Miriam had sung an old song, her voice low and soothing, and Eli had felt a peace that seemed to stretch into forever. Those days had been before the soldiers came, before Daniel had joined a caravan and Leah had married a farmer in Bethlehem. The moonlight shifted, casting shadows across the gate, and Eli's hand rested on the bench, its texture a comfort. He thought of Daniel, now a man grown, his last letter carried by a trader speaking of distant markets and safe travels. The boy had promised to return, his words etched in Eli's memory like the carvings on the gate. Leah, too, had sent word, her life with her husband a quiet joy. Her children, Eli's grandchildren, playing in the fields. The old man smiled, the image of their faces warming him against the night's chill. The moonlight a mirror to their laughter. A soft breeze stirred, carrying the scent of the sea. And Eli's thoughts turned to a winter night when the family had huddled by the hearth. The wind had howled then, rattling the shutters, but inside, the fire had glowed, casting shadows that danced on the walls. Miriam had told stories of the stars, pointing to constellations with names like ancient friends. And the children had listened, their eyes wide. Eli had held Leah on his lap, her small hand in his, while Daniel traced the patterns in the air, their innocence a shield against the world's harshness. The night grew quieter, the waves' rhythm a gentle lullaby, and Eli's eyelids grew heavy. He pictured Miriam weaving by the fire, her hands steady, her voice humming the song from that spring evening. The Crusades had taken much, friends lost to battle. The road to Jerusalem fraught with danger, but the memory of his family remained. A light that the war could not dim. He wondered if Daniel saw the same moon tonight, perhaps from a camp under the stars, or if Leah's children played in its glow, their laughter echoing his own past. The gate stood silent, its stone a steadfast guardian, and Eli leaned back, the bench creaking softly under his weight. In his half-dream state, he saw the fig tree again, its branches heavy with fruit. The family gathered beneath. Miriam smiled at him, her hand reaching out, and the children ran to his side, their voices a chorus of joy. The wind carried their song, blending with the sea's whisper, and the moonlight bathed the scene in a tender glow. The Crusades faded, the soldiers' banners replaced by the rustle of leaves, and the hills of his youth stretched around him. Sleep came gently, like the tide's ebb, carrying Eli into a dream where he walked home to Miriam. The gate behind him a distant memory. The fig tree stood tall, its shade a refuge, and the family sat together, the bread warm in their hands, the stars above a canopy of peace. Leah's laughter rang out, Daniel's voice joined the song, and Eli felt the weight of his years lift, the moonlight guiding him to a place where time stood still. The night held him close, the sea's rhythm his heartbeat, and the gatekeeper drifted into a sleep as deep as the ocean's embrace. 9. The Forgotten Lyre. The night draped the ruins of a forgotten village near Tyre in a velvet silence. The hour creeping past 9:11 p.m. on this imagined evening in the year 1192. When the echoes of the Third Crusade had begun to fade into a weary truce. The moon hung high, its pale light spilling over crumbled stone walls and scattered tiles, casting long shadows that danced with the breeze. Among the debris walked Tariq, a wandering musician of 40 years. His cloak tattered from months on the road, his heart heavy with the quest that had driven him since childhood. In his hands, he carried a small, weathered sack, its contents a mystery to all but him, and his steps were guided by the faint hope of reclaiming a piece of his past. The air was cool, carrying the scent of dry earth and the faint tang of salt from the nearby sea. A reminder of Tyre's coastal proximity. The village, once a thriving hamlet, had been abandoned after a siege. Its homes reduced to skeletal remains, its streets silent save for the rustle of wind through broken beams. Tariq paused by a collapsed wall, its stones moss-covered and ancient, and listened to the night, the distant crash of waves, the soft hoot of an owl perched in a gnarled tree, the gentle sigh of the breeze. His fingers brushed the sack, and he felt the weight of memory, a longing for the lyre his father had played before war took him away. Tariq sat on a fallen pillar, the stone cool beneath him, and closed his eyes, letting the sounds of the night weave into his thoughts. He remembered his father, Ismail, a musician whose lyre had filled their home with melodies that danced like sunlight on water. The instrument had been carved from olive wood, its strings taut with a voice that sang of love and loss, its curves worn smooth by Ismail's hands. Tariq had been a boy of 10 when the Crusaders came, their banners a storm on the horizon, and in the chaos, the lyre had been left behind, buried under the rubble of their fleeing village. Ismail had perished in the flight, his last song a whisper in Tariq's memory. The breeze strengthened, carrying a faint hum, and Tariq's imagination took flight. He pictured his father playing by the hearth, the fire's glow illuminating the lyre's polished surface, the notes rising to meet the stars. The family had gathered then, his mother weaving, his younger sister clapping to the rhythm, their home a haven of warmth. The Crusaders' arrival had shattered that peace, their swords clashing with the melody, and Tariq had clung to his father's hand as they fled, the lyre abandoned in the dust. Now, years later, he sought to reclaim it, a thread to the past he could not let go. He rose, his staff tapping the ground, and moved deeper into the ruins, the moonlight guiding his path. The village was a maze of memories, a broken loom here, a child's toy there, each relic a silent witness to lives lost. He paused by a half-standing wall, its stones etched with faint carvings, and knelt to sift through the debris. His fingers brushed wood, splintered but familiar, and his heart quickened. He uncovered a fragment of the lyre's frame, its curve unmistakable, though the strings were gone, snapped by time. Tears stung his eyes, not of sorrow but of connection, and he held the piece close, its texture a echo of his father's touch. The night grew quieter, the waves' rhythm a distant lullaby, and Tariq sat among the ruins, the fragment in his lap. He closed his eyes again, letting the breeze carry him back to those nights by the hearth. He heard Ismail's voice, low and resonant, teaching him the chords, his fingers guiding Tariq's over the strings. The melody had been simple then, a tune of the hills, but it had grown in his memory, a symphony of loss and hope. The Crusaders' shouts faded, replaced by the lyre's song, and Tariq felt his father's presence, a whisper in the wind. The stars above pulsed, their light reflecting off the fragment, and Tariq's breathing slowed. He imagined rebuilding the lyre, restringing it with threads of memory, its voice rising again over the ruins. The village came alive in his mind, children laughing, women weaving, men singing, the lyre at the center, its notes a bridge to the past. The breeze seemed to hum that tune, a faint echo of Ismail's playing, and Tariq's hands traced the wood, feeling the rhythm of those lost days. The night deepened, the moon climbing higher, and Tariq leaned against the wall, the fragment a weight of comfort. He pictured his sister, now a woman in a distant village, her hands busy with a loom, and his mother, her voice stilled by time. The lyre had been their bond, and though incomplete, it was a piece of them he could hold. The owl hooted again, its call blending with the waves, and Tariq's eyelids grew heavy, the ruins softening into a dreamscape. In his half-dream state, he saw Ismail standing before him, the lyre whole in his hands, its strings gleaming under the moonlight. The village rebuilt itself around them, the stones rising, the homes filling with light. Ismail played, the melody weaving through the air, and Tariq joined him, his own hands finding the chords. The family gathered, their laughter a harmony, the Crusades a distant memory. The breeze carried the song beyond the ruins, a gift to the night, and Tariq felt a peace settle over him. Sleep came gently, like the fall of a note, carrying Tariq into a dream where the lyre sang anew. The ruins faded, the village thrived, and Ismail's voice guided him through the melody. The stars a chorus above, the fragment rested in his lap, a promise of restoration, and the night held him close. The waves rhythm his heartbeat, the owls call a lullaby as he drifted into a sleep as deep as the sea. 10. The vineyard keeper in Edessa, continued. The night settled over Edessa like a soft sigh. The hour drifting past 9:16 p.m. on this imagined evening in the year 1146. When the shadow of the Second Crusade began to creep across the land. The air was warm, carrying the rich scent of ripe grapes and the faint musk of turned earth. A fragrance that lingered in the memory of Samuel, an aging vineyard keeper of 70 years. He sat on a wooden bench outside his small stone cottage, its walls weathered by time, overlooking the rows of vines that stretched toward the horizon. The moon hung low, its silver light bathing the vineyard in a gentle glow, casting long shadows from the gnarled stakes that supported the plants. The day had been long, the sun beating down on the fields as Samuel tended the last of the season's grapes. His hands stained purple from the fruit. Now, as the stars began to pierce the sky, the vineyard grew quiet, the only sounds the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze and the distant hoot of an owl nesting in a nearby oak. Samuel's cloak, patched and faded, rested over his shoulders, and his silver hair caught the moonlight as he gazed at the vines. His staff, carved with the marks of decades, leaned against the bench, a silent companion to his reflections. The world beyond the vineyard, the clatter of approaching armies, the whispers of war, felt distant, a shadow he chose to ignore tonight. He closed his eyes, the cool night air brushing his face, and let the vineyard's stillness guide his thoughts. In his mind, he saw the fields as they had been in his youth, before the Crusades brought ruin. The vines had been heavy with clusters of grapes, their skins glistening under the sun, the air thick with the promise of wine. He remembered the harvest festivals, the villagers gathering with baskets and songs, their laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves. His father, a vintner like him, had led the work, his hands guiding Samuel's through the pruning, his voice humming a tune that echoed in the rows. The breeze strengthened, carrying the scent of the grapes, and Samuel's memories deepened. He pictured a summer day 30 years past, when the harvest had been the richest he'd known. The vines had bowed under the weight of the fruit, their leaves a canopy of green, and the village had celebrated for days. He saw his wife, Hannah, her dark hair tied with a ribbon, pressing grapes with her feet in a wooden vat, her laughter ringing out as juice stained her skirt. Their son, Ezra, a boy of 8, had run through the rows, his small hands clutching a grape he'd stolen, his grin a beam of sunlight. The wine that year had been legendary, its taste a memory Samuel could still summon, a deep, fruity warmth that lingered on the palate, shared in clay cups under the stars. The night grew quieter, the stars multiplying above, their light reflecting off the dew on the vines. Samuel leaned back against the bench, the wood creaking softly, and thought of a spring evening when the first buds had appeared. The air had been sweet with blossom, the ground soft with new growth, and he and Hannah had walked the rows, planning the season. Ezra had followed, his stick a pretend sword, dreaming of adventures, unaware of the war that would soon change their lives. The Crusaders had come 2 years later, their siege leaving the vineyard scarred, the vines torn, and Hannah and Ezra lost to the chaos. The memory of their screams as they fled still haunted him, a sharp contrast to the peace he sought now. A gentle wind stirred the leaves, and Samuel's hand rested on the bench, its texture a comfort. He recalled a night when the moon had been full, its light turning the vineyard into a sea of silver. He'd sat here then, as he did now, watching the stars with Hannah, her head on his shoulder. They'd spoken of the future, another harvest, another child, dreams that the war had shattered. The vines had recovered slowly, their resilience a quiet strength, but the laughter had faded, leaving Samuel with the memory of those bountiful days. He remembered the taste of the wine they'd made that year, a blend of joy and sorrow, sipped in silence after the siege. The moonlight shifted, casting shadows across the rows, and Samuel's breathing slowed, matching the vineyard's rhythm. He pictured Ezra helping him prune, his small hands mimicking his father's. The boy's questions filling the air. Why do the vines need cutting, Papa? And Samuel's patient answers, teaching him the art of the land. He saw Hannah weaving baskets from the vine's offcuts, her hands steady, her voice humming the harvest song, a melody of hope that had once filled their home. The Crusades had taken them, their bodies lost in the flight, but the vineyard remained, a testament to their love, its grapes a bittersweet reminder of what once was. The night deepened, the breeze carrying a hint of dew, and Samuel pulled his cloak tighter. In his half-dream state, he saw the vineyard as it had been, rows heavy with fruit, the village alive with song, Hannah and Ezra at his side. The Crusaders faded, their banners replaced by the rustle of leaves, and the harvest festival returned, the air filled with the scent of wine and bread. He walked the rows with Hannah, her hand in his, Ezra skipping ahead, the sun warm on their faces. The wine flowed freely, the villagers danced, and the vineyard thrived, a haven untouched by war. The owl hooted again, its call blending with the wind, and Samuel's eyelids grew heavy. He pictured the siege's end, the silence that followed, the vines slowly regrowing as he worked alone, his hands trembling but determined. The grapes had returned, sparse at first, then fuller with each season, a silent promise of renewal. He imagined Hannah and Ezra returning in spirit, their voices joining the wind's song, their laughter echoing in the rows. The moonlight bathed the scene, a silver blessing, and Samuel felt a peace settle over him. The vineyard a bridge to his lost family. Sleep came gently, like the fall of a grape from the vine, carrying Samuel into a dream where the harvest never ended. The rows stretched endlessly, heavy with fruit, the village alive with celebration. Hannah pressed grapes, her laughter ringing. Ezra ran with his stick sword, and Samuel stood among them, the wine flowing from his hands. The Crusades were a distant memory, the stars above a chorus of approval, and the vineyard cradled him in a peace as rich as the wine he'd once made. The night held him close. The owls call a lullaby, and the vines whispered their song into his sleep. 11. Moonlit night in Tripoli. The night unfurled over Tripoli like a delicate veil. The hours slipping past 9:20 p.m. on this imagined evening in the year 1193. When the aftermath of the Third Crusade had left the coastal city in a fragile calm. The moon rose high, its silvery light spilling over the whitewashed houses and narrow streets, casting a gentle glow that softened the edges of the world. In a small room above a quiet alley, sat Layla, a young weaver of 18 years. Her nimble fingers paused over the loom. The air carried the faint scent of olive oil from a nearby lamp and the crisp tang of the sea breeze drifting from the harbor. A fragrance that mingled with the wool she worked. The day had been long, the clack of the loom filling the room as Layla wove a tapestry for a merchant's order, her hands moving with the rhythm of habit. Now, as the village settled into sleep, the only sounds were the soft creak of the wooden floor beneath her and the distant call of a nightbird perched on a rooftop. Her shawl, a soft blue woven by her own hands, draped over her shoulders, and her dark hair fell in loose strands as she gazed out the window. The moonlight bathed the street below, illuminating the cobblestones, and she felt a quiet peace settle over her, broken only by the whisper of a dream that had haunted her nights. She leaned closer to the window, the cool glass against her cheek, and closed her eyes, letting the night's stillness guide her thoughts. In her mind, she saw a figure, a mysterious knight, his armor glinting under the moon, his horse's hooves silent on the stones. He had passed through Tripoli weeks ago, a lone traveler amid the Crusaders' retreat, his face hidden by a helm but his presence striking. Layla had watched from this very window, her loom stilled, as he rode slowly, his cloak billowing like a shadow. The villagers had whispered of him, a man seeking peace, not war, and she had felt a pull, a story unfinished in his wake. The breeze strengthened, carrying the sea's whisper, and Layla's imagination took flight. She pictured the knight dismounting, his armor shedding like a second skin to reveal a weary face, lines etched by battles fought and lost. He sat by the well in the village square, the moonlight reflecting off the water, and spoke to her in her dream, his voice a low murmur of tales from distant lands. She saw him describe a valley where the Crusades had spared the fields, where olive trees stood tall and children played, a place untouched by the strife that had scarred Tripoli. His words wove a tapestry of hope, and Layla's heart beat with the rhythm of his story. The loom creaked softly as she shifted, the wool's texture a comfort under her fingers, and her thoughts deepened. She imagined the knight removing his helm, revealing eyes that held the weight of years, and offering her a small token, a silver coin etched with a cross, a memento of his journey. He spoke of a vow to lay down his sword, to seek a life beyond war, and Layla saw him walking the hills, his armor replaced by a shepherd's cloak. The moonlight seemed to dance with his words, the nightbird's call blending with his voice, and she felt a longing to follow him into that peaceful valley. The village grew quieter, the stars multiplying above, their light filtering through the window to play on the unfinished tapestry. Layla leaned back, the chair's wood groaning gently, and pictured the knight pausing at the edge of Tripoli, looking back at her window. In her dream, he raised a hand in farewell, his figure fading into the moonlight, leaving behind the coin and a promise of return. The sea breeze carried his scent, leather and dust, mingling with the wool, and she wove that memory into her work, the threads a silent tribute to his passing. A soft wind stirred the curtains, and Lila's breathing slowed, matching the night's rhythm. She saw the knight in her mind's eye, his horse grazing by the well, his voice recounting a night when the stars had guided him through a storm. The Crusades had ended, he said, but the scars remained, and he sought a place to heal. Layla imagined herself leaving the loom, joining him on that journey, her tapestry flung over her shoulder like a banner of peace. The hills of her dream were green, the air sweet with wildflowers, and the knight's laughter replaced the clatter of swords. The night deepened, the moon climbing higher, and Lila's eyelids grew heavy. She pictured the village square under the same moonlight, the well reflecting the stars, and the knight's figure a shadow among the houses. The nightbird called again, its song a lullaby, and she felt the weight of the day lift, the tapestry's threads blending with her dream. She wondered if he'd return, his silver coin a talisman, or if he'd found his valley, his peace complete. The loom stood silent, a witness to her thoughts, and the moonlight bathed her in a tender glow. In her half-dream state, Layla saw the knight waiting by the well, his hand outstretched, the coin glinting in his palm. She joined him, her shawl fluttering, and they walked the hills together, the tapestry trailing behind like a river of color. The Crusades faded, the village thrived, and the moonlight guided them to a place where the sea's whisper was their only companion. The nightbird's call wove into his voice, a duet of peace, and Layla felt a warmth spread through her, the dream a refuge from the world. Sleep came gently, like the fall of a thread from the loom, carrying Layla into a dream where the night returned. The village square filled with light, the well overflowed with stars, and they danced under the moon. His armor gone, her tapestry complete, the sea sang its lullaby. The night held her close, and the window framed a scene of eternal calm, the night's smile a beacon as she drifted into a sleep as deep as the night itself. 12. The goat herder on Mount Lebanon. The night draped Mount Lebanon in a tranquil embrace, the hours slipping past 9:25 p.m. on this imagined evening in the year 1194. When the echoes of the Third Crusade had settled into a weary stillness across the region. The rugged peaks rose sharply against the sky, their slopes cloaked in cedar trees and rocky outcrops, bathed in the soft silver of a rising moon. Amid this wild landscape sat Ibrahim, an elderly goat herder of 72 years, his weathered frame resting against a boulder near his small flock. The air was cool, carrying the earthy scent of pine needles and the faint musk of the goats, a fragrance that had been his companion through decades of tending the hills. The day had been long, the sun casting golden light across the slopes as Ibrahim guided his goats along the narrow paths, his staff tapping the stone to keep them in line. Now, as the stars began to pierce the velvet sky, the herd settled, their soft bleating blending with the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Ibrahim's cloak, patched with scraps of wool, hung loosely over his shoulders, and his gray beard caught the moonlight as he gazed toward the horizon. His staff, carved with notches marking each season, leaned against the boulder, a silent witness to his solitary life. The distant rumble of war had faded, leaving only the natural symphony of the mountains. He closed his eyes, the cool night air brushing his face, and let the mountain's quiet guide his thoughts. In his mind, he heard a sound that had become his nightly companion, the faint, resonant tolling of monastery bells from a hidden retreat nestled in the peaks. The chimes drifted on the wind, their notes clear yet distant, a melody that seemed to weave through the cedar branches and echo off the rocks. Ibrahim tilted his head, his ears attuned to the rhythm, and felt a peace settle over him, a connection to a world beyond the herds and the hills. The breeze carried the bell's song, and Ibrahim's memories drifted to his youth, when he had first heard them as a boy of 12. The monastery, a place of prayer and solitude, had been a beacon on the mountain, its bells ringing out at dawn and dusk. He remembered following his father, a herder too, along the trails, the goats bleating as the chimes guided their steps. The air had been crisp then, the scent of cedar mingling with the goat's wool, and the bells had seemed a promise of safety, a sound that tethered him to the land. Those days had been before the Crusades, before the mountains echoed with the clash of steel. The night grew quieter, the stars multiplying above, their light reflecting off the dew on the grass. Ibrahim leaned back against the boulder, its roughness a comfort, and thought of a winter evening when the bells had rung through a snowstorm. The flakes had fallen thick, blanketing the slopes, and he had huddled with his flock in a cave, the chimes piercing the silence. His father had told stories then, of monks who tended the mountain, their prayers rising with the bells, and of a time when the land knew only peace. The warmth of the goats and the bell's steady toll had lulled him to sleep. A memory that warmed him now. A gentle wind stirred the cedars, and Ibrahim's hand rested on the boulder, its texture grounding him. He recalled a spring night when the bells had guided a lost traveler to his camp. The man, a merchant fleeing the crusader routes, had stumbled through the dark, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. The chimes had led him to Ibrahim's fire, and they had shared bread and tea, the bells a backdrop to their quiet talk. The merchant had spoken of a valley spared by war, its fields green, its people safe, and Ibrahim had felt a pang of longing for that peace. The bells a reminder of what might be. The moonlight shifted, casting shadows across the slope, and Ibrahim's breathing slowed, matching the bell's rhythm. He pictured the monastery, its stone walls glowing under the moon, the monks in their robes tending the gardens, their voices joining the chimes in a hymn. The Crusades had brought soldiers to the foothills, their banners a stain on the mountains. But the bells had rung on, a steadfast presence. Ibrahim wondered if the monks prayed for him, their song a thread connecting him to a higher peace. The goats his silent congregation. The night deepened, the breeze carrying a hint of frost, and Ibrahim pulled his cloak tighter. In his half-dream state, he saw the monastery as it had been, its gates open, its bells calling him closer. He walked the trails with his father, the goats trailing behind, the chimes a guide through the cedars. The crusades faded, the soldiers' shouts replaced by the rustle of leaves, and the mountain thrived, its slopes alive with the bell's song. He saw the merchant again, his face peaceful, sharing tales by the fire, the valley's green a vision of hope. The owl hooted, its call blending with the bells, and Ibrahim's eyelids grew heavy. He pictured the monks ringing the chimes, their hands steady, their prayers rising with the wind. The goats slept around him, their breathing a soft chorus, and the bells seemed to toll for him alone, a lullaby woven into the night. He felt the boulder beneath him, the grass against his hands, and the chimes became a cradle, guiding him deeper into rest. Sleep came gently, like the fall of a cedar cone, carrying Ibrahim into a dream where the monastery stood eternal. The bells rang clear, the monks welcomed him, and his father sat by the fire, the goats grazing in peace. The Crusades were a distant memory, the mountains a sanctuary, and the chimes sang him into a sleep as deep as the night's embrace. The stars above a silent witness to his journey. 13. The Tale of the Silver Mirror. The night enveloped the dusty caravan route near Antioch in a serene hush. The hours slipping past 9:28 p.m. on this imagined evening in the year 1195, when the scars of the Third Crusade had begun to heal into a fragile peace. The moon hung high, its pale light spilling over the winding path and the scattered tents of a merchant caravan, casting a silver glow that softened the rugged landscape. Among the travelers sat Omar, a merchant of 58 years, his hands rough from years of handling goods, his heart stirred by a discovery made that day. He rested on a woven mat outside his tent, the air carrying the scent of camel hair and the faint spice of his wares, saffron, myrrh, and dried figs, a fragrance that mingled with the cool desert breeze. The day had been long, the sun blazing over the route as Omar bartered with villagers and inspected his caravan's load. Now, as the stars began to pierce the sky, the camp grew quiet, the only sounds the soft snort of camels settling down and the distant howl of a jackal echoing from the hills. Omar's cloak, faded from sun and travel, draped over his shoulders, and his graying hair caught the moonlight as he turned a small object in his hands, a silver mirror. Its surface tarnished but its frame intricately carved with vines and crosses. He had found it buried in the sand near an abandoned outpost, a relic of times past, and its weight felt like a story waiting to be told. He leaned back against a saddlebag, the leather creaking softly, and closed his eyes, letting the night's stillness guide his thoughts. In the mirror's reflection, he saw not his own weathered face but the faint image of a crusader, a man with a stern jaw and eyes that held the weight of battle. His armor glinting as if newly forged. Omar tilted the mirror, the moonlight dancing on its surface, and felt a pull, a whisper from the past that urged him to listen. He imagined the crusader, perhaps a knight from the First Crusade a century ago, lost in these lands, his reflection captured in the silver as a memory of his journey. The breeze carried a soft hum, and Omar's imagination took flight. He pictured the knight, Sir Roland, riding through these very sands in 1098, his horse's hooves kicking up dust, his banner fluttering with a red cross. The mirror, Omar thought, must have been a gift from his lady, a token carried into battle, its surface reflecting her face before he left. He saw Roland pausing at an oasis, the mirror in his hand, gazing at her image under a starlit sky, his voice murmuring a promise to return. The Crusades had taken him far, and Omar imagined the knight leaving the mirror behind, buried with his hopes when he fell in a skirmish near Antioch. The night grew quieter, the stars multiplying above, their light reflecting off the mirror's edges. Omar leaned back, the mat's texture a comfort under him, and thought of a night when the caravan had camped near those ruins. The air had been thick with the scent of sage, the sand warm underfoot, and he had felt a presence, a whisper on the wind. The mirror's discovery seemed fated, its reflection a bridge to Roland's story. He pictured the knight's last moments, the mirror slipping from his hand as he prayed, its silver catching the moonlight, preserving his face for Omar to find. A gentle wind stirred the tent flaps, and Omar's hand rested on the mirror, its coolness grounding him. He recalled a tale his father had told, of a crusader's ghost haunting the desert, his reflection lingering in lost objects. The mirror felt alive in his grasp, and he saw Roland again, his armor dented, his eyes weary, speaking of a home he'd never see. Omar imagined the knight's lady waiting, her days spent weaving, her nights spent gazing at the stars. The mirror a silent companion to her grief. The breeze seemed to carry her sigh, blending with the camel's soft breaths, and Omar felt a pang of connection across the centuries. The moonlight shifted, casting shadows across the camp, and Omar's breathing slowed, matching the night's rhythm. He pictured Roland's journey, the battles fought, the comrades lost, the moment he laid down his sword by the oasis. The mirror had been his solace, its reflection a link to love, and Omar saw it buried under sand, waiting for him to unearth it. The Crusades had ended, but the mirror held their story, a testament to a man who sought peace in a time of war. He wondered if Roland's spirit lingered, watching as the caravan moved on, the mirror a relic of his soul. The night deepened, the breeze carrying a hint of dew, and Omar pulled his cloak tighter. In his half-dream state, he saw Roland standing before him, the mirror whole in his hands, its surface gleaming. The desert bloomed around them, oases with palm trees, villages with laughter, the Crusades a distant memory. Roland offered the mirror, his voice a whisper of thanks, and Omar took it, feeling the knight's presence merge with his own. The caravan faded, the camp became a garden, and the moonlight bathed them in peace. The jackal howled again, its call blending with the wind, and Omar's eyelids grew heavy. He pictured the lady waiting, her loom stilled, her eyes on the stars, the mirror reflecting Roland's return. The camels slept around him, their breathing a soft chorus, and the mirror seemed to hum, a lullaby woven into the night. He felt the mat beneath him, the sand against his fingers, and the reflection became a cradle, guiding him deeper into rest. Sleep came gently, like the fall of sand through an hourglass, carrying Omar into a dream where Roland lived again. The oasis thrived, the mirror shone, and the knight and his lady danced under the stars. The caravan a silent witness. The Crusades were forgotten, the desert a haven, and the moonlight sang Omar into a sleep as deep as the night's embrace. The mirror's reflection a guardian of his dreams. 14. The candle maker in Bethlehem. The night draped Bethlehem in a tender stillness, the hours slipping past 9:32 p.m. on this imagined evening in the year 1196. When the echoes of the Third Crusade had faded into a fragile peace across the Holy Land. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of beeswax and the earthy aroma of olive wood, a fragrance that filled the small workshop of Elias, a candle maker of 63 years. He sat at his workbench, his hands steady as he molded wax into slender candles, the soft glow of a single flame illuminating the room. The moon hung low outside, its silver light streaming through the window, casting a gentle sheen over the stone walls and the scattered tools of his trade. The day had been long. The sun warming the hills as Elias gathered wax from his hives and prepared wicks from flax. His movements slow but practiced. Now, as the village settled into sleep, the only sounds were the soft drip of melted wax into a mold and the distant chime of a bell from the church, its notes drifting on the breeze. Elias's cloak, patched with remnants of old fabric, hung over a chair, and his gray hair caught the moonlight as he worked, his face etched with lines of quiet resilience. The world beyond Bethlehem, the clatter of retreating armies, the scars of war, felt distant, a shadow he chose to set aside tonight. He closed his eyes for a moment, the warmth of the wax against his fingers a comfort, and let the workshop's calm guide his thoughts. In his mind, he saw the candles as they would be, lit for Christmas. Their flames a beacon in the darkness, a tradition he had upheld since boyhood. He remembered his father, a candle maker too, teaching him to dip the wicks with care, the air thick with the scent of honey and smoke. Those days had been before the Crusades, when Bethlehem had glowed with the joy of the season, the streets filled with carols and the scent of pine from makeshift mangers. The breeze carried a soft hum, and Elias's memories deepened. He pictured a winter night 30 years past, when the Christmas candles had lined every window, their light reflecting off the snow-dusted streets. His wife, Miriam, had stood beside him, her hands shaping dough for the feast, her laughter mingling with the crackle of the fire. Their daughter, Sarah, a girl of 7, had danced with a candle in hand, her small face aglow, the wax dripping onto the floor in a playful mess. The church bells had rung, calling the village to prayer, and Elias had felt a peace that seemed to stretch into the heavens. The night grew quieter, the stars multiplying above, their light filtering through the window to play on the finished candles. Elias leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking softly, and thought of a Christmas Eve when the Crusades had brought chaos to the land. The soldiers had passed through, their banners a stark contrast to the festive lights, and Miriam and Sarah had fled with the other women, seeking safety in the hills. Elias had stayed, his candles a small defiance, their glow a prayer for their return. The war had taken them, their fate lost in the turmoil, leaving him with the workshop and the memory of that night. A gentle wind stirred the curtains, and Elias's hand rested on a candle, its warmth grounding him. He recalled a moment when the bells had rung through a storm, the rain lashing the windows, and he had worked late to finish the Christmas candles. The wax had dripped steadily, the flame flickering, and he had imagined Miriam and Sarah safe, their voices joining the carols. The Crusades had scarred the land, but the church had stood firm, its bells a reminder of hope, and Elias had found solace in the rhythm of his craft. The candles a bridge to his lost family. The moonlight shifted, casting shadows across the workbench, and Elias's breathing slowed, matching the drip of wax. He pictured Sarah helping him mold candles, her small hands clumsy but eager, the wax staining her fingers as she giggled. He saw Miriam weaving garlands of pine, her hands steady, her voice humming a lullaby that had once filled their home. The Crusades had silenced them, but the candles remained, their light a testament to their love, a glow that pierced the darkness of war. The night deepened, the breeze carrying a hint of frost, and Elias pulled his cloak closer. In his half-dream state, he saw Bethlehem as it had been, streets aglow with candles, the church filled with song, Miriam and Sarah at his side. The Crusades faded, the soldiers' shouts replaced by the rustle of pine, and the Christmas Eve returned, the air filled with the scent of wax and bread. He walked the village with his family, the candles lighting their path, the bells ringing a joyous peal. The church bell tolled again, its sound blending with the wind, and Elias's eyelids grew heavy. He pictured the candles lighting the windows, their flames dancing, a beacon for Miriam and Sarah to find their way home. The goats outside bleated softly, their presence a quiet chorus, and the wax dripped its final drop, a lullaby woven into the night. He felt the workbench beneath him, the wax against his hands, and the candlelight became a cradle, guiding him deeper into rest. Sleep came gently, like the flicker of a flame, carrying Elias into a dream where Christmas never ended. The village thrived, the candles glowed, and Miriam and Sarah returned, their laughter filling the workshop. The Crusades were a distant memory. The church bells sang, and the moonlight bathed him in peace. the candles a guardian of his dreams as he drifted into a sleep as deep as the night's embrace. 15. The journey of the wild horse. The night wrapped the plains near Jerusalem in a tranquil stillness. The hours slipping past 9:36 p.m. on this imagined evening in the year 1197. When the aftermath of the Third Crusade had settled into a weary calm across the Holy Land. The moon rose high, its silver light spilling over the rolling grasslands and scattered olive trees, casting a gentle glow that softened the rugged terrain. Among the shadows grazed a wild horse, its coat a dappled gray streaked with the dust of its travels, its mane fluttering in the breeze. The air carried the scent of dry grass and the faint musk of the earth, a fragrance that mingled with the horse's quiet breaths. A lone survivor of the wars that had scarred the land. The day had been long, the sun casting golden rays across the plains as the horse roamed freely, its hooves tracing paths worn by time. Now, as the stars began to pierce the sky, the landscape grew silent, the only sounds the soft rustle of grass in the wind and the distant cry of a nightjar perched in a tree. The horse stood still, its head raised, its ears twitching as if listening to a story carried on the breeze. To those who might have watched, it seemed a creature of instinct, but in its stillness, it held a tale, a journey whispered through the wind, a narrative of battlefields and lost companions, shared with the night. The horse closed its eyes, the cool night air brushing its flanks, and let the wind guide its thoughts. In its mind, the breeze became a voice, recounting its wanderings since the Crusades began. It remembered a stable in Acre, its first home, where it had carried a young knight, its mane braided with ribbons, its steps proud. The air had been thick with the scent of hay and leather, the knight's laughter a melody as they rode through the streets. But the Crusades had called, and the horse had been swept into the chaos, its rider lost to a skirmish near Arsif, the ribbons torn away by the wind. The breeze strengthened, carrying the memory of that battle, and the horse's thoughts deepened. It saw the clash of steel, the shouts of men, the dust rising like a storm, its hooves pounding the earth as it fled. The knight had fallen, his hands slipping from the reins, and the horse had run, its heart racing with fear. The wind whispered of the plains it had crossed, fields littered with broken lances, rivers stained with blood, villages reduced to ash. Yet, through it all, the horse had survived, its spirit unbroken, its journey a silent testament to resilience. The night grew quieter, the stars multiplying above, their light reflecting off the horse's coat. It lowered its head, the grass cool beneath its hooves, and listened as the wind recounted a night when it had found refuge in a grove of olives. The air had been sweet with fruit, the ground soft with moss, and a shepherd had tended its wounds, his hands gentle, his voice a lullaby. The horse had stayed there, its mane growing wild, its strength returning, the wind carrying the shepherd's song across the plains. The Crusades had raged on, but that grove had been a haven, a memory etched in its soul. A gentle gust stirred the grass, and the horse's ears flicked, its thoughts turning to a winter day when it had wandered near Jerusalem. The ground had been hard, the air crisp with frost, and the wind had guided it to a ruined stable, its walls crumbling but its hay still warm. The horse had rested there, the breeze whispering tales of knights who had once sheltered within, their voices lost to time. It had seen their ghosts in the moonlight, men in armor, their faces weary, their swords sheathed, and felt a kinship, a shared journey through war's aftermath. The moonlight shifted, casting shadows across the plains, and the horse's breathing slowed, matching the wind's rhythm. It pictured the battlefield of Hattin, where it had been captured, its rider a crusader felled by an arrow. The wind told of its escape, its hooves thundering through the dust, the cries of men fading behind it. The horse had roamed free since, its coat marked by scars, its spirit shaped by the land. The breeze carried the scent of time from those fields, a reminder of life beyond the war, and the horse felt a peace settle over it. The night deepened, the wind carrying a hint of dew, and the horse lowered itself to the grass, its body a silhouette against the moon. In its half-dream state, it saw the grove again, the shepherd's hands on its mane, the olives glowing in the dusk. The Crusades faded, the battlefields turned to meadows, and the horse ran with a herd, its mane flowing, its steps light. The wind whispered of a valley where no swords clashed, where the grass grew tall, and the horse felt the presence of its lost rider. His laughter a melody in the breeze. The nightjar called, its song blending with the wind, and the horse's eyes grew heavy. It pictured the stable at Acre. The ribbons returned, the night astride once more. Their journey whole, the plains stretched around it, the stars a canopy of light, and the wind became the rider's voice, guiding it home. The grass cradled it, the dew a gentle touch, and the breeze sang a lullaby, weaving the horse's tale into the night. Sleep came gently, like the fall of a leaf on the wind, carrying the horse into a dream where the plains thrived. The grove stood eternal, the shepherd smiled, and the night rode beside it, the Crusades a distant echo. The moon watched over, the stars pulsed with approval, and the horse drifted into a sleep as deep as the night's embrace. Its journey a whisper on the breeze. 16. The bookkeeper in Constantinople. The night cloaked Constantinople in a hushed reverence. The hours slipping past 9:38 p.m. on this imagined evening in the year 1198. When the city stood as a fragile bastion amid the lingering echoes of the Third Crusade. The moon hung high, its silvery light filtering through the narrow windows of a stone scriptorium, casting a gentle glow over the shelves of parchment and ink. Within this quiet sanctuary sat Theodorus, an old bookkeeper of 67 years, his frail hands cradling a precious manuscript, its pages yellowed but alive with the wisdom of ages. The air carried the faint scent of aged leather and the sharp tang of ink, a fragrance that had been his companion through decades of transcription. The day had been long, the sun casting golden rays across the city as Theodorus worked to preserve the texts threatened by the encroaching unrest. Now, as the city settled into sleep, the only sounds were the soft rustle of turning pages and the distant toll of a church bell, its notes drifting on the breeze. Theodorus's robe, threadbare but meticulously clean, draped over his shoulders, and his white hair caught the moonlight as he gazed at the manuscript. His quill, its feather worn, rested on the desk, a silent partner to his vigil. The world beyond the scriptorium, the clamor of sieges, the whispers of war, felt distant, a shadow he chose to hold at bay tonight. He closed his eyes, the cool night air brushing his face, and let the scriptorium's calm guide his thoughts. In his mind, he saw the manuscript as it had been when he first received it, a gift from a monk fleeing the Crusades. Its cover embossed with gold, its pages filled with hymns and histories. He remembered his youth, a scribe of 20, learning to trace the letters under his master's tutelage, the air thick with the scent of vellum and wax. Those days had been before the sieges, when Constantinople had glowed with the light of learning, its libraries a haven for scholars and pilgrims. The breeze carried a soft hum, and Theodorus's memories deepened. He pictured a winter night 40 years past, when the scriptorium had been alive with the scratch of quills, the flicker of oil lamps casting shadows on the walls. His wife, Sophia, had brought him tea, her hands warm against the cold stone, her laughter a melody that filled the room. Their son, Nikos, a boy of 5, had sat at his feet, tracing letters in the dust, his small voice asking questions about the stories within the pages. The church bells had rung, calling the city to prayer, and Theodorus had felt a peace that seemed to stretch into the heavens. The night grew quieter, the stars multiplying above, their light filtering through the window to play on the manuscript. Theodorus leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking softly, and thought of a spring evening when the Crusades had brought chaos to the gates. The soldiers had stormed the outskirts, their shouts a stark contrast to the scriptorium's silence, and Sophia and Nikos had fled with the other families, seeking safety in the hills. Theodorus had stayed, his manuscript a sacred charge, its pages a shield against the war's destruction. The siege had taken them, their fate lost in the turmoil, leaving him with the quill and the memory of that night. A gentle wind stirred the parchments, and Theodorus's hand rested on the manuscript, its texture a comfort. He recalled a moment when the bells had rung through a storm, the rain lashing the windows, and he had worked late to copy a passage of peace. The ink had flowed steadily, the lamp flickering, and he had imagined Sophia and Nikos safe, their voices joining the hymns. The Crusades had scarred the city, but the scriptorium had stood firm, its books a reminder of hope. And Theodorus had found solace in the rhythm of his craft, the manuscript a bridge to his lost family. The moonlight shifted, casting shadows across the desk, and Theodorus's breathing slowed, matching the turn of a page. He pictured Nikos helping him grind ink, his small hands clumsy but eager, the dust staining his fingers as he giggled. He saw Sophia mending robes, her hands steady, her voice humming a lullaby that had once filled their home. The Crusades had silenced them, but the manuscript remained, its words a testament to their love, a light that pierced the darkness of war. The night deepened, the breeze carrying a hint of frost, and Theodorus pulled his robe closer. In his half-dream state, he saw Constantinople as it had been, streets aglow with lamps, the church filled with song, Sophia and Nikos at his side. The Crusades faded, the soldiers' shouts replaced by the rustle of pages, and the scriptorium thrived, the air filled with the scent of ink and parchment. He walked the halls with his family, the manuscript open in his hands, the bells ringing a joyous peal. The church bell tolled again, its sound blending with the wind, and Theodorus's eyelids grew heavy. He pictured the manuscript completed, its pages glowing, a beacon for Sophia and Nikos to find their way home. The parchments rustled softly, their presence a quiet chorus, and the ink dried its final drop, a lullaby woven into the night. He felt the desk beneath him, the quill against his fingers, and the candlelight became a cradle, guiding him deeper into rest. Sleep came gently, like the turn of a page, carrying Theodorus into a dream where the scriptorium never darkened. The city thrived, the manuscript glowed, and Sophia and Nikos returned, their laughter filling the room. The Crusades were a distant memory. The church bells sang, and the moonlight bathed him in peace, the words a guardian of his dreams as he drifted into a sleep as deep as the night's embrace. 17. The broken bridge over Euphrates. The night draped the banks of the Euphrates River in a peaceful stillness. The hours slipping past 9:42 p.m. on this imagined evening in the year 1199. When the land east of the Holy Land was slowly mending after the turmoil of the Third Crusade. The moon hung high, its silver light shimmering on the water's surface, casting a gentle glow over the reeds and the remnants of a broken bridge that stretched incomplete across the river. Beside the bank sat Yusuf, a fisherman of 69 years, his weathered hands resting on a net, his gaze fixed on the fractured stones. The air carried the scent of damp earth and the faint musk of fish, a fragrance that had been his companion since boyhood. The day had been long, the sun warming the river as Yusuf cast his net, the water rippling with each throw. Now, as the stars began to pierce the sky, the river grew quiet, the only sounds the soft lapping of waves against the shore and the occasional croak of a frog hidden in the reeds. Yusuf's cloak, patched with remnants of sailcloth, hung loosely over his shoulders, and his silver hair caught the moonlight as he leaned against a willow tree. His fishing rod, its line slack, rested beside him, a silent partner to his reflections. The world beyond the river, the echoes of past sieges, the scars of war, felt distant, a shadow he chose to set aside tonight. He closed his eyes, the cool night air brushing his face, and let the river's calm guide his thoughts. In his mind, he saw the bridge as it had been in his youth, a sturdy span of stone connecting the villages on either bank, its arches a testament to the region's peace. He remembered his father, a stonemason, leading the work, his hands shaping the blocks, his voice humming a tune that echoed over the water. Those days had been before the Crusades, when the Euphrates had flowed with trade and laughter, the bridge a lifeline for travelers and fishermen alike. The breeze carried a soft ripple, and Yusuf's memories deepened. He pictured a summer day 40 years past, when the bridge had stood whole, its stones warm under his bare feet as he ran across with his brother Ismail. The river had sparkled, the air thick with the scent of wildflowers, and the villagers had gathered for a festival, their songs mingling with the water's flow. His mother had spread a mat by the bank, her hands busy with bread and olives, her laughter a melody that filled the day. The bridge had been their pride, a symbol of unity, its shadow a cool respite from the sun. The night grew quieter, the stars multiplying above, their light reflecting off the broken arches. Yusuf leaned back against the willow, its bark a comfort, and thought of a spring evening when the Crusades had brought destruction. The soldiers had crossed the river, their horses thundering, their swords shattering the stones in a bid to halt an enemy advance. The bridge had crumbled, its arches collapsing into the water, and Yusuf had watched from the bank, his heart aching as the dust settled. His family had fled, Ismail lost to the chaos. His mother's voice silenced, leaving Yusuf with the river and the memory of that ruin. A gentle wind stirred the reeds, and Yusuf's hand rested on the net, its texture grounding him. He recalled a night when the moon had been full, its light turning the broken bridge into a jagged silhouette. He had sat here then, as he did now, listening to the river's lament, its flow a whisper of the past. His father had spoken of rebuilding, his hands sketching plans in the sand, but the war had taken him too, his tools buried with the stones. Yusuf had fished alone since, the net his only companion, the bridge a dream he clung to amid the silence. The moonlight shifted, casting shadows across the water, and Yusuf's breathing slowed, matching the river's rhythm. He pictured the bridge whole again, its stones rising from the depths, the arches spanning the current. He saw Ismail running across, his brother's laughter echoing, his mother spreading her mat, the villagers singing once more. The Crusades had scarred the land, but the river flowed on, a constant amid the change, and Yusuf felt a hope stir. A vision of renewal carried on the breeze. The night deepened, the wind carrying a hint of mist, and Yusuf pulled his cloak tighter. In his half-dream state, he saw the bridge as it might be, restored with his hands. The stones smooth, the arches strong, the Crusades faded, the soldiers' shouts replaced by the rustle of reeds. And the festival returned, the air filled with the scent of bread and flowers. He walked the span with his family, the water sparkling below, the moon a witness to their joy. The frog croaked again, its sound blending with the wind, and Yusuf's eyelids grew heavy. He pictured the first stone laid, his father's hands guiding his, the bridge rising from the river's embrace. The net lay idle, the river sang its lullaby, and the moonlight became a cradle, guiding him deeper into rest. He felt the willow beneath him, the grass against his hands, and the dream of rebuilding wove into the night. Sleep came gently, like the flow of the Euphrates, carrying Yusuf into a dream where the bridge stood eternal. The stones gleamed, the villagers gathered, and Ismail and his mother smiled, their voices joining the water's song. The Crusades were a distant memory, the river a haven, and the moonlight bathed him in peace. The bridge a guardian of his dreams as he drifted into a sleep as deep as the night's embrace. 18. The rug weaver in Aleppo. The night settled over Aleppo like a soft whisper, the hour drifting past 9:44 p.m. on this imagined evening in the year 1200. When the city was slowly rebuilding after the storms of the Third Crusade had passed. The moon hung high, its silvery light streaming through the open window of a modest workshop, casting a gentle glow over the looms and piles of dyed wool. Within this quiet haven sat Amina, an aging rug weaver of 71 years, her gnarled hands guiding a shuttle through the warp threads, her heart wrapped in the rhythm of her craft. The air carried the faint scent of saffron and madder root, the earthy aroma of the dyes she had mixed, a fragrance that had been her companion through decades of weaving. The day had been long, the sun warming the city as Amina selected wool and spun threads, her fingers moving with the patience of time. Now, as the streets below grew silent, the only sounds were the soft click of the loom and the distant call of a muezzin, his voice weaving through the night like a thread of silk. Amina's shawl, faded but intricately patterned, draped over her shoulders, and her white hair caught the moonlight as she worked, her face lined with the wisdom of years. The world beyond the workshop, the echoes of past sieges, the scars of war, felt distant, a shadow she chose to leave outside tonight. She closed her eyes for a moment, the wool's texture against her fingers a comfort, and let the loom's rhythm guide her thoughts. In her mind, she saw Aleppo as it had been in her youth, a city of bustling markets and golden domes, its streets alive with the clatter of merchants and the hum of looms. She remembered her mother, a weaver too, teaching her to knot the threads with care, the air thick with the scent of turmeric and rosewater. Those days had been before the Crusades, when the city had thrived, its rugs a treasure traded across the world, their patterns a map of prosperity. The breeze carried a soft rustle, and Amina's memories deepened. She pictured a spring day 45 years past, when the market had been a riot of color, the stalls brimming with spices and silks. Her father had sold her first rug that day, its crimson and gold design fetching a fine price, and the family had celebrated with a feast under the stars. Her brother, Hassan, a boy of 10, had danced with a tambourine, his laughter mingling with the rustle of palm leaves. The rugs had been their pride, their threads a testament to the city's wealth, their patterns a legacy passed down through generations. The night grew quieter, the stars multiplying above, their light filtering through the window to play on the unfinished rug. Amina leaned back in her chair, the wood creaking softly, and thought of a winter evening when the Crusades had brought chaos to Aleppo's gates. The soldiers had stormed the outskirts, their shouts a stark contrast to the workshop's calm, and her family had fled, seeking safety in the hills. The market had burned, the looms silenced, and Hassan had been lost in the flight, his tambourine left behind. Amina had stayed, her hands weaving through the grief, the rug a shield against the war's destruction. A gentle wind stirred the wool, and Amina's hand rested on the shuttle, its smoothness grounding her. She recalled a moment when the muezzin's call had rung through a storm, the rain lashing the windows, and she had worked late to finish a rug for a fleeing merchant. The threads had flowed steadily, the dyes blending, and she had imagined Hassan safe, his laughter joining the call. The Crusades had scarred the city, but the workshop had stood firm, its rugs a reminder of hope, and Amina had found solace in the rhythm of her craft, the patterns a bridge to her lost brother. The moonlight shifted, casting shadows across the loom, and Amina's breathing slowed, matching the shuttle's pass. She pictured Hassan helping her sort wool, his small hands eager but clumsy, the dyes staining his fingers as he giggled. She saw her mother weaving beside her, her hands steady, her voice humming a lullaby that had once filled their home. The Crusades had taken them, their fates lost in the chaos. But the rug remained, its threads a testament to their love, a design that pierced the darkness of war. The night deepened, the breeze carrying a hint of dew, and Amina pulled her shawl tighter. In her half-dream state, she saw Aleppo as it had been, markets aglow with lamps, the mosque filled with prayer, Hassan and her mother at her side. The Crusades faded, the soldiers' shouts replaced by the rustle of silk, and the workshop thrived, the air filled with the scent of dyes and wool. She walked the market with her family, the rug trailing behind like a banner of peace. The muezzin's call a joyous peal. The muezzin's voice faded into the wind, and Amina's eyelids grew heavy. She pictured the rug completed, its patterns glowing, a beacon for Hassan and her mother to find their way home. The wool rustled softly, its presence a quiet chorus, and the shuttle clicked its final pass, a lullaby woven into the night. She felt the chair beneath her, the threads against her hands, and the candlelight became a cradle, guiding her deeper into rest. Sleep came gently, like the fall of a thread from the loom, carrying Amina into a dream where the market never darkened. The city thrived, the rug glowed, and Hassan and her mother returned, their laughter filling the workshop. The Crusades were a distant memory. The mosque bells sang, and the moonlight bathed her in peace, the patterns a guardian of her dreams as she drifted into a sleep as deep as the night's embrace. 19. A quiet night in Nazareth. The night enveloped Nazareth in a serene embrace, the hour slipping past 9:49 p.m. on this Tuesday, June 17, 2025, though in the heart of Miriam, an old woman of 74 years. It was the imagined evening of 1201, when the land was slowly healing from the wounds of the Third Crusade. The moon hung low, its silver light spilling over the whitewashed rooftops and narrow alleys, casting a gentle glow that softened the edges of the village. Within a small stone house, Miriam sat by a low table, her gnarled hands cradling a cup of herbal tea, her voice a soft murmur as she spoke to her granddaughter, Layla, a girl of 8. The air carried the faint scent of chamomile and the warm aroma of baked bread from the oven, a fragrance that filled the room with comfort. The day had been long, the sun warming the hills as Miriam tended her small garden and Layla played among the olive trees. Now, as the village settled into sleep, the only sounds were the gentle crackle of the hearth and the distant bark of a dog echoing from the outskirts. Miriam's shawl, woven with faded patterns, draped over her shoulders, and her silver hair caught the moonlight as she gazed at the stars through the open window. Her staff, carved with the marks of years, leaned against the wall, a silent witness to her tales. The world beyond Nazareth, the remnants of war, the scars of crusader camps, felt distant, a shadow she chose to leave outside tonight. She closed her eyes for a moment, the tea's warmth against her palms a comfort, and let the night's calm guide her thoughts. In her mind, she saw the stars as they had been in her youth, a canopy of light guiding the prophets of old. She remembered her grandfather, a storyteller like her, sitting by this same hearth, his voice weaving tales of a man named Elias, a prophet said to have walked these hills centuries before. Those days had been before the Crusades, when Nazareth had glowed with the quiet faith of its people. The stars a map to divine wisdom. The breeze carried a soft twinkle, and Miriam's memories deepened. She pictured a winter night 50 years past, when the stars had seemed to pulse with life, their light reflecting off the snow-dusted streets. Her grandfather had told of Elias, a humble shepherd guided by a single bright star to a cave where he received a vision of peace. The village had gathered then, their breath visible in the cold, their voices joining in a hymn as the star led them to prayer. Miriam, a girl of 10, had sat at his feet, her small hands clutching a woolen blanket, her heart aglow with the tale. The night grew quieter, the stars multiplying above, their light filtering through the window to play on Layla's wide eyes. Miriam leaned back against the wall, the stone cool against her back, and thought of a spring evening when the Crusades had brought turmoil to Nazareth's gates. The soldiers had passed through, their banners a stark contrast to the village's peace. And her family had hidden, the stars their only guide. Her grandfather had been lost in the flight, his voice silenced, leaving Miriam with the memory of his stories and the duty to pass them on. A gentle wind stirred the curtains, and Miriam's hand rested on Layla's head, her hair soft under her fingers. She recalled a moment when the stars had guided a traveler to their door. A man fleeing the Crusader roots, his face weary but kind. The night had been dark, the wind howling, and the stars had shone like beacons, leading him to their hearth. He had shared bread and tales of a prophet's wisdom, his voice blending with the wind, and Miriam had felt a connection to Elias. The stars a bridge to the past. The Crusades had scarred the land, but the stars had remained, a constant amid the change. The moonlight shifted, casting shadows across the room, and Miriam's breathing slowed, matching the crackle of the fire. She pictured Elias walking the hills, his staff tapping the earth, the star above him a guide through the night. She saw her grandfather retelling the tale, his hands tracing the sky, and Layla listening now, her eyes reflecting the starlight. The Crusades had taken much, but the story endured, a light that pierced the darkness of war, a legacy woven into the night. The night deepened, the breeze carrying a hint of dew, and Miriam pulled her shawl tighter. In her half-dream state, she saw Nazareth as it had been, streets aglow with starlight. The village filled with song, her grandfather and family at her side. The Crusades faded, the soldiers' shouts replaced by the rustle of olive leaves, and the tale of Elias returned, the air filled with the scent of bread and herbs. She walked the hills with Layla, the star guiding their path, the prophet's wisdom a joyous peal. The dog barked again, its sound blending with the wind, and Miriam's eyelids grew heavy. She pictured the star shining brighter, a beacon for her grandfather to find his way home, its light reflecting in Layla's eyes. The fire crackled softly, its presence a quiet chorus, and the tea cooled its final sip, a lullaby woven into the night. She felt the wall beneath her, the blanket against her hands, and the starlight became a cradle, guiding her deeper into rest. Sleep came gently, like the fall of a star from the sky, carrying Miriam into a dream where the village never darkened. The hills thrived, the star glowed, and her grandfather and family returned, their laughter filling the house. The Crusades were a distant memory. The church bells sang, and the moonlight bathed her in peace. The prophet's tale a guardian of her dreams as she drifted into a sleep as deep as the night's embrace. 20. The honey hunter in Samaria. The night cloaked the hills of Samaria in a tranquil stillness, the hour resting at 9:50 p.m. on this Tuesday, June 17, 2025, though in the soul of Jacob, a beekeeper of 68 years. It was the imagined evening of 1202, when the land was slowly mending after the Third Crusade's turmoil. The moon hung high, its silver light spilling over the rocky slopes and scattered olive groves, casting a gentle glow that softened the rugged terrain. Within a small cave nestled in the hillside, Jacob sat on a worn mat, his hands cradling a honeycomb, its golden hue glinting in the lamplight. The air carried the sweet scent of honey and the faint musk of damp stone. A fragrance that had been his companion since youth. The day had been long, the sun warming the hills as Jacob tracked the bees, his steps guided by their hum through the wild thyme and thistles. Now, as the village below settled into sleep, the only sounds were the soft drip of water from the cave's ceiling and the distant trill of a cricket hidden in the grass. Jacob's cloak, patched with leather scraps, hung over his shoulders, and his gray hair caught the moonlight as he gazed at the honeycomb. His staff, notched with the marks of seasons, leaned against the cave wall, a silent witness to his solitary pursuit. The world beyond Samaria, the echoes of past battles, the scars of war, felt distant, a shadow he chose to leave outside tonight. He closed his eyes, the honey's warmth against his palms a comfort, and let the cave's quiet guide his thoughts. In his mind, he saw the hive as it had been when he first uncovered it, an ancient structure. Its wax built into the cave's crevices, a relic of times before the Crusades. He remembered his father, a honey hunter too, teaching him to read the bees' dance, the air thick with the scent of wildflowers and wax. Those days had been before the war, when Samaria had hummed with the industry of beekeepers. The honey a sweet gift traded in the markets. The breeze carried a soft buzz, and Jacob's memories deepened. He pictured a summer day 45 years past, when the hives had been full, their combs dripping with amber. His mother had stood by the cave entrance, her hands stirring honey into bread dough, her laughter mingling with the bees' hum. His sister, Rachel, a girl of 9, had chased butterflies, her small voice calling him to play, the honey staining her fingers as she sampled the spoils. The village had celebrated then, the honey flowing freely, its taste a memory Jacob could still summon, a rich, floral sweetness that lingered on the tongue. The night grew quieter, the stars multiplying above, their light filtering through the cave's mouth to play on the honeycomb. Jacob leaned back against the wall, the stone cool against his back, and thought of a spring evening when the Crusades had brought chaos to Samaria's hills. The soldiers had marched through, their banners a stark contrast to the village's peace, and his family had fled, seeking safety in the valleys. The hives had been abandoned, the bees scattered, and Rachel had been lost in the flight, her laughter silenced, leaving Jacob with the cave and the memory of that loss. A gentle wind stirred the air, and Jacob's hand rested on the honeycomb, its texture grounding him. He recalled a moment when the bees had returned, their hum a sign of life after the war. The cave had been dark, the wind howling, and he had found the ancient hive, its wax intact, a relic of resilience. The honey had been bitter at first, touched by the smoke of battle, but it had sweetened with time, and Jacob had felt a connection to his father. The bees a bridge to the past. The Crusades had scarred the land, but the hive had endured, a constant amid the change. The moonlight shifted, casting shadows across the cave, and Jacob's breathing slowed, matching the drip of water. He pictured Rachel helping him smoke the hive, her small hands trembling but eager, the honey staining her cheeks as she giggled. He saw his mother weaving baskets from reeds, her hands steady, her voice humming a lullaby that had once filled their home. The Crusades had taken them, their fates lost in the chaos. But the honeycomb remained, its sweetness a testament to their love, a light that pierced the darkness of war. The night deepened, the breeze carrying a hint of dew, and Jacob pulled his cloak tighter. In his half-dream state, he saw Samaria as it had been, hills aglow with hives, the village filled with song, Rachel and his mother at his side. The Crusades faded, the soldiers' shouts replaced by the hum of bees, and the honey harvest returned, the air filled with the scent of flowers and wax. He walked the hills with his family, the honeycomb in his hands, the bees dancing a joyous tune. The cricket trilled again, its sound blending with the wind, and Jacob's eyelids grew heavy. He pictured the hive thriving, its honey flowing, a beacon for Rachel and his mother to find their way home. The water dripped softly, its presence a quiet chorus, and the honeycomb glowed its final drop, a lullaby woven into the night. He felt the mat beneath him, the wax against his hands, and the lamplight became a cradle, guiding him deeper into rest. Sleep came gently, like the flight of a bee to its hive, carrying Jacob into a dream where the hills never darkened. The village thrived, the honey glowed, and Rachel and his mother returned, their laughter filling the cave. The Crusades were a distant memory. The bees sang, and the moonlight bathed him in peace. The honeycomb a guardian of his dreams as he drifted into a sleep as deep as the night's embrace. 21. The Lost Bell in Tyre. The night wrapped Tyre in a tender silence. The hour resting at 9:58 p.m. on this Tuesday, June 17, 2025, though in the spirit of Father Elias, a priest of 66 years. It was the imagined evening of 1203, when the city was slowly rebuilding after the ravages of the Third Crusade. The moon hung high, its silver light spilling over the harbor and the weathered stones of a small church, casting a gentle glow that softened the scars of war. Within the church's shadowed nave, Elias sat on a wooden stool, his hands tracing the cracked surface of a bronze bell, its once clear voice silenced by battle. The air carried the faint scent of sea salt and the musty aroma of old wood, a fragrance that had been his companion since he took his vows. The day had been long, the sun warming the city as Elias gathered tools and sought advice from the few remaining craftsmen, his steps guided by a hope to restore the bell. Now, as the streets below grew quiet, the only sounds were the soft creak of the stool and the distant lapping of waves against the shore. Elias's robe, patched with remnants of altar cloth, draped over his shoulders, and his gray hair caught the moonlight as he gazed at the bell. His staff, carved with prayers, leaned against the altar, a silent witness to his devotion. The world beyond the church, the echoes of past sieges, the remnants of war, felt distant, a shadow he chose to leave outside tonight. He closed his eyes, the bell's cool metal against his palms a comfort, and let the church's calm guide his thoughts. In his mind, he saw the bell as it had been in his youth, a vibrant voice ringing out over Tyre, its tones calling the faithful to prayer. He remembered his mentor, Father Matthias, teaching him to tend the bell, the air thick with the scent of incense and the sea. Those days had been before the Crusades, when the church had stood as a beacon, its bells a melody that united the city, their echoes a promise of peace. The breeze carried a soft chime, and Elias's memories deepened. He pictured a summer day 40 years past, when the bell had pealed for a wedding, its bronze singing with joy. The harbor had been alive with ships, the air filled with the scent of fish and flowers, and the villagers had danced, their laughter mingling with the chimes. His sister, Lydia, a girl of 12, had rung the bell with him, her small hands eager, her giggles echoing in the tower. The sound had been a celebration, a thread of happiness woven into the city's fabric. The night grew quieter, the stars multiplying above, their light filtering through the stained glass to play on the bell. Elias leaned back against the altar, the stone cool against his back, and thought of a winter evening when the Crusades had brought destruction to Tyre's shores. The soldiers had stormed the city, their cannons shattering the church's walls, and the bell had fallen, its voice cracked by a stray shot. Lydia had fled with the other women, seeking safety in the hills, and Elias had stayed, his hands tending the wounded. The bell's silence a wound in his heart. A gentle wind stirred the curtains, and Elias's hand rested on the bell, its texture grounding him. He recalled a moment when the sea had calmed after the siege, the waves lapping softly, and he had begun to plan its restoration. The air had been thick with the scent of smoke, the church a ruin, but the bell's fragments had called to him, a voice waiting to be reborn. The Crusades had scarred the land, but the church had endured, its stones a reminder of hope, and Elias had found solace in the rhythm of his task. The bell a bridge to his lost sister. The moonlight shifted, casting shadows across the nave, and Elias's breathing slowed, matching the creak of the stool. He pictured Lydia helping him polish the bell, her small hands smudged with bronze dust, her laughter filling the tower. He saw Father Matthias guiding the repairs, his hands steady, his voice humming a hymn that had once filled their home. The Crusades had taken them, their fates lost in the chaos. But the bell remained, its silence a testament to their love, a sound waiting to pierce the darkness of war. The night deepened, the breeze carrying a hint of mist, and Elias pulled his robe tighter. In his half-dream state, he saw Tyre as it had been, harbor aglow with lights, the church filled with song, Lydia and Father Matthias at his side. The Crusades faded, the soldiers' shouts replaced by the lapping of waves, and the bell's voice returned, the air filled with the scent of incense and salt. He stood in the tower with his family, the bell ringing a joyous peal, the moon a witness to their joy. The waves lapped again, their sound blending with the wind, and Elias's eyelids grew heavy. He pictured the bell restored, its tone clear, a beacon for Lydia and Father Matthias to find their way home. The stool creaked softly, its presence a quiet chorus, and the moonlight became a cradle, guiding him deeper into rest. He felt the altar beneath him, the bell against his hands, and the silence wove into a lullaby, a promise of renewal. Sleep came gently, like the fall of a chime from the tower, carrying Elias into a dream where the church never darkened. The city thrived, the bell rang, and Lydia and Father Matthias returned, their laughter filling the nave. The Crusades were a distant memory. The waves sang, and the moonlight bathed him in peace, the bell's voice a guardian of his dreams as he drifted into a sleep as deep as the night's embrace. 22. The gardener in Caesarea. The night embraced Caesarea with a tranquil hush, the hour resting at 10:11 p.m. on this Tuesday, June 17, 2025, though in the heart of Isaac, an old gardener of 70 years. It was the imagined evening of 1204, when the city was slowly reclaiming its peace after the Third Crusade's turmoil. The moon hung high, its silvery light spilling over the crumbling walls of a castle ruin, casting a gentle glow that softened the jagged stones. Within the shadow of the broken towers, Isaac knelt in the earth, his hands cradling a small seedling, its roots fragile yet full of promise. The air carried the faint scent of damp soil and the sweet aroma of wild lavender, a fragrance that had been his companion since youth. The day had been long, the sun warming the ruins as Isaac gathered seeds from the hills and tended the patches of green he had nurtured. Now, as the city settled into sleep, the only sounds were the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze and the distant murmur of waves against the shore. Isaac's cloak, patched with remnants of sackcloth, hung loosely over his shoulders, and his white hair caught the moonlight as he gazed at the seedling. His hoe, its handle worn smooth, rested against a fallen wall, a silent witness to his labor. The world beyond the ruins, the echoes of past sieges, the scars of war, felt distant, a shadow he chose to leave behind tonight. He closed his eyes, the soil's coolness against his palms a comfort, and let the garden's quiet guide his thoughts. In his mind, he saw the castle as it had been in his youth, a grand fortress with gardens blooming within its walls, its towers a testament to the city's strength. He remembered his father, a gardener too, teaching him to plant with care, the air thick with the scent of roses and thyme. Those days had been before the Crusades, when Caesarea had thrived, its flowers a symbol of beauty, its walls a shield for the people. The breeze carried a soft rustle, and Isaac's memories deepened. He pictured a summer day 45 years past, when the castle gardens had been a riot of color, the roses climbing the walls, the air filled with the hum of bees. His wife, Rebecca, had walked the paths with him, her hands gathering petals for perfume, her laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves. Their daughter, Esther, a girl of 6, had danced among the flowers, her small hands clutching a daisy, her giggles a melody that filled the air. The garden had been their sanctuary, a place of peace amid the city's bustle. The night grew quieter, the stars multiplying above, their light filtering through the ruins to play on the seedling. Isaac leaned back against a broken wall, the stone cool against his back, and thought of a winter evening when the Crusades had brought destruction to Caesarea's gates. The soldiers had stormed the castle, their cannons shattering the walls, and the gardens had been trampled, the flowers crushed underfoot. Rebecca and Esther had fled with the other families, seeking safety in the hills, and Isaac had stayed, his hands tending the wounded, the ruins a silent witness to his loss. A gentle wind stirred the lavender, and Isaac's hand rested on the seedling, its fragility grounding him. He recalled a moment when the sea had calmed after the siege, the waves lapping softly, and he had begun to plant again. The air had been thick with the scent of ash, the castle a shell, but the earth had called to him, a voice waiting to be reborn. The Crusades had scarred the land, but the ruins had offered soil, and Isaac had found solace in the rhythm of his craft. The flowers a bridge to his lost family. The moonlight shifted, casting shadows across the garden, and Isaac's breathing slowed, matching the rustle of leaves. He pictured Esther helping him water the plants, her small hands splashing the earth, her laughter filling the ruins. He saw Rebecca weaving garlands from the blooms, her hands steady, her voice humming a lullaby that had once filled their home. The Crusades had taken them, their fates lost in the chaos. But the seedling remained, its growth a testament to their love, a beauty that pierced the decay of war. The night deepened, the breeze carrying a hint of dew, and Isaac pulled his cloak tighter. In his half-dream state, he saw Caesarea as it had been, castle aglow with lights, the gardens filled with song, Rebecca and Esther at his side. The Crusades faded, the soldiers' shouts replaced by the hum of bees, and the flowers returned, the air filled with the scent of roses and lavender. He walked the paths with his family, the seedling blooming into a garden, the moon a witness to their joy. The waves murmured again, their sound blending with the wind, and Isaac's eyelids grew heavy. He pictured the garden restored, its flowers thriving, a beacon for Rebecca and Esther to find their way home. The wall creaked softly, its presence a quiet chorus, and the moonlight became a cradle, guiding him deeper into rest. He felt the earth beneath him, the seedling against his hands, and the silence wove into a lullaby, a promise of renewal. Sleep came gently, like the fall of a petal from a bloom, carrying Isaac into a dream where the ruins never darkened. The castle thrived, the garden glowed, and Rebecca and Esther returned, their laughter filling the paths. The Crusades were a distant memory. The waves sang, and the moonlight bathed him in peace, the flowers a guardian of his dreams as he drifted into a sleep as deep as the night's embrace. 23. The Hawk's Flight. The night cloaked the vast desert near Damascus in a serene stillness. The hour resting at 10:13 p.m. on this Tuesday, June 17, 2025, though in the keen senses of a hawk named Zephyr. It was the imagined evening of 1205, when the land was slowly finding peace after the Third Crusade's tumult. The moon hung high, its silver light spilling over the endless sands and scattered dunes, casting a gentle glow that softened the rugged expanse. Zephyr perched on a lone acacia tree, its wings folded, its sharp eyes scanning the horizon. The air carried the faint scent of dry sage and the warm breath of the earth, a fragrance that had been its companion through years of soaring above the land. The day had been long, the sun blazing across the desert as Zephyr glided on thermals, its wings tracing the wind's path. Now, as the stars began to pierce the sky, the desert grew quiet, the only sounds the soft sough of sand shifting and the distant howl of a jackal echoing from a distant ridge. Zephyr's feathers, dappled with shades of brown and gold, caught the moonlight as it settled, its talons gripping the branch with a gentle strength. The world below, the remnants of Crusader camps, the scars of war, felt distant, a shadow it observed from above, a story carried on the wind. It closed its eyes, the cool night air brushing its plumage, and let the desert's silence guide its thoughts. In its mind, the wind became a voice, whispering tales of the land it had witnessed since the Crusades began. It remembered a caravan crossing the sands in 1187, its banners fluttering, its merchants singing songs of trade. The air had been thick with the scent of spices and camel sweat, the wind carrying their laughter until a raid silenced it, the hawk watching from above as the dust settled over their broken goods. Zephyr had soared on, its wings a silent witness to the fleeting nature of human joy. The breeze strengthened, carrying the memory of a battlefield near Ascalon, and Zephyr's thoughts deepened. It saw the clash of steel, the cries of men, the dust rising like a storm, its keen eyes tracing the chaos from the sky. A knight had fallen, his horse rearing, and the hawk had circled, its shadow passing over the fallen banner. The wind whispered of the aftermath, the scavengers picking at armor. The silence creeping in, and Zephyr had flown on, its flight a thread through the war's tapestry, the desert holding the stories in its sands. The night grew quieter, the stars multiplying above, their light reflecting off the hawk's feathers. It tilted its head, the branch creaking softly, and listened as the wind recounted a night when it had rested in a ruined village. The air had been sweet with the scent of abandoned orchards, the ground soft with fallen fruit, and a lone child had watched it from a doorway, her eyes wide with wonder. The Crusades had left the village empty, its walls crumbling, but the child's presence had been a spark, and Zephyr had stayed, its wings shading her as she slept, the wind carrying her soft breaths. A gentle gust stirred the acacia leaves, and Zephyr's talons shifted, its thoughts turning to a spring day when it had soared over a monastery in the hills. The air had been crisp, the scent of incense mingling with pine, and the wind had guided it to a garden where monks tended flowers. The Crusades had spared this place, their prayers rising with the smoke, and Zephyr had circled, its eyes catching the flicker of candles. The wind whispered of their hymns, a melody of peace, and the hawk had felt a calm, a contrast to the battles it had seen. The desert a canvas for their quiet faith. The moonlight shifted, casting shadows across the sands, and Zephyr's breathing slowed, matching the wind's rhythm. It pictured the battlefield of Hattin, where it had witnessed a lone survivor, a soldier praying under the sun. The wind told of his plea, his voice lost to the heat, and Zephyr had flown low, its shadow a companion until he rose and walked away. The Crusades had ended, but the desert held their stories, and the hawk had carried them on its wings, a messenger of memory amid the silence. The night deepened, the breeze carrying a hint of dew, and Zephyr settled lower on the branch. In its half-dream state, it saw the caravan thriving, the merchants singing, the child laughing in the village, the monks tending their garden. The Crusades faded, the battlefields turned to oases, and Zephyr soared over a land of peace, its wings brushing the stars. The wind whispered of a valley where no swords clashed, where the sand bloomed with life, and the hawk felt the presence of the fallen, their voices a melody in the breeze. The jackal howled again, its call blending with the wind, and Zephyr's eyes grew heavy. It pictured the night rising, the child smiling, the monks praying, their stories woven into the night. The acacia cradled it, the dew a gentle touch, and the wind became a lullaby, guiding it deeper into rest. It felt the branch beneath its talons, the air against its feathers, and the moonlight became a cradle, a promise of peace. Sleep came gently, like the glide of a wing on the wind, carrying Zephyr into a dream where the desert never darkened. The caravan traded, the village thrived, and the monks sang, the Crusades a distant echo. The moon watched over, the stars pulsed with approval, and the hawk drifted into a sleep as deep as the night's embrace, its flight a guardian of the land's silent tales. 24. The storyteller in Hebron. The night wove a tranquil veil over Hebron, the hour resting at 10:14 p.m. on this Tuesday, June 17, 2025, though in the weary heart of Khalil, an elder of 76 years. It was the imagined evening of 1206, when the land was cautiously seeking harmony after the Third Crusade's strife. The moon hung high, its silver light spilling over the stone houses and olive groves, casting a gentle glow that softened the edges of the village. Beneath a sprawling fig tree in the courtyard, Khalil sat on a woven mat, his voice a soft murmur as he spoke to a small gathering of villagers, men, women, and children, their faces illuminated by the flicker of a small fire. The air carried the faint scent of fig leaves and the warm aroma of burning cedar, a fragrance that had been his companion through decades of storytelling. The day had been long, the sun warming the hills as Khalil tended his small garden and greeted travelers passing through Hebron, his steps guided by a hope for unity. Now, as the village settled into sleep, the only sounds were the gentle crackle of the fire and the distant bleat of a goat from a nearby pen. Khalil's robe, patched with threads of many colors, draped over his shoulders, and his white beard caught the moonlight as he gazed at the stars through the tree's branches. His staff, carved with symbols of peace, leaned against the trunk, a silent witness to his tales. The world beyond Hebron, the echoes of tribal conflicts, the scars of war, felt distant, a shadow he chose to transform with his words tonight. He closed his eyes for a moment, the fire's warmth against his palms a comfort, and let the night's calm guide his thoughts. In his mind, he saw Hebron as it might be, a land where tribes lived as one, their differences woven into a tapestry of harmony. He remembered his youth, a boy of 15, listening to his grandfather, a storyteller too, spin tales of a time when the desert bloomed with cooperation, the air thick with the scent of shared harvests. Those days had been before the Crusades, when Hebron had thrived, its people united under the stars, their voices a song of peace. The breeze carried a soft hum, and Khalil's memories deepened. He pictured a spring day 50 years past, when the village had gathered under this very fig tree, their hands joining to build a well, The air had been sweet with the scent of oranges, the ground soft with new grass, and the children had danced, their laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves. His sister, Fatima, a girl of 10, had sung a lullaby, her voice weaving through the crowd, her small hands clapping to the rhythm. The well had been their pride, a symbol of unity, its water a gift to all tribes. The night grew quieter, the stars multiplying above, their light filtering through the branches to play on the listeners' faces. Khalil leaned back against the tree, the bark cool against his back, and thought of a winter evening when the Crusades had brought division to Hebron's gates. The soldiers had marched through, their banners a stark contrast to the village's peace, and the tribes had clashed, their unity shattered. Fatima had fled with their mother, seeking safety in the hills, and Khalil had stayed, his stories a balm for the wounded, the fig tree a refuge amid the strife. A gentle wind stirred the leaves, and Khalil's hand rested on his staff, its carvings grounding him. He recalled a moment when the tribes had met again, their voices raised in anger, and he had stood under the tree, his tale of peace a bridge between them. The air had been thick with the scent of dust, the well dry from neglect, but the wind had carried his words, a vision of harmony. The Crusades had scarred the land, but the tree had endured, its branches a reminder of hope, and Khalil had found solace in the rhythm of his stories, the words a connection to his lost sister. The moonlight shifted, casting shadows across the courtyard, and Khalil's breathing slowed, matching the fire's crackle. He pictured Fatima helping him gather figs, her small hands eager but clumsy, the fruit staining her fingers as she giggled. He saw his grandfather weaving tales, his hands steady, his voice humming a lullaby that had once filled their home. The Crusades had taken them, their fates lost in the chaos. But the story remained, its peace a testament to their love, a light that pierced the darkness of war. The night deepened, the breeze carrying a hint of dew, and Khalil pulled his robe tighter. In his half-dream state, he saw Hebron as it might be, village aglow with lights. The tribes united in song, Fatima and his grandfather at his side. The Crusades faded, the soldiers' shouts replaced by the rustle of leaves, and the well flowed again, the air filled with the scent of oranges and bread. He walked the paths with his family, the story trailing behind like a banner of peace, the moon a witness to their joy. The goat bleated again, its sound blending with the wind, and Khalil's eyelids grew heavy. He pictured the well restored, its water clear, a beacon for Fatima and his grandfather to find their way home. The fire crackled softly, its presence a quiet chorus, and the tea cooled its final sip, a lullaby woven into the night. He felt the mat beneath him, the staff against his hands, and the starlight became a cradle, guiding him deeper into rest. Sleep came gently, like the fall of a leaf from the tree, carrying Khalil into a dream where the village never darkened. The tribes thrived, the well glowed, and Fatima and his grandfather returned, their laughter filling the courtyard. The Crusades were a distant memory. The stars sang, and the moonlight bathed him in peace, the story a guardian of his dreams as he drifted into a sleep as deep as the night's embrace. 25. The last night in Jerusalem. The night enveloped Jerusalem in a profound stillness, the hour resting at 10:16 p.m. on this Tuesday, June 17, 2025, though in the weary heart of Gideon, a traveler of 78 years. It was the imagined evening of 1207, when the city was cautiously rebuilding after the Third Crusade's wake. The moon hung high, its silver light spilling over the ancient walls and olive groves, casting a gentle glow that softened the scars of conflict. Beside a small campfire on the outskirts, Gideon sat on a worn blanket, his hands cradling a clay cup of cooled tea, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames. The air carried the faint scent of smoke and the earthy aroma of the surrounding hills, a fragrance that had been his companion through decades of wandering. The day had been long, the sun casting golden rays across the roads as Gideon trudged into Jerusalem, his staff tapping the stone, his body aching from the journey. Now, as the city settled into sleep, the only sounds were the soft crackle of the fire and the distant call of a night owl perched in a cypress tree. Gideon's cloak, patched with scraps of caravan cloth, hung loosely over his shoulders, and his white hair caught the moonlight as he stared into the flames. His pack, heavy with memories, rested beside him, a silent witness to his travels. The world beyond the fire, the echoes of past battles. The weight of war felt distant, a shadow he chose to release into the night. He closed his eyes, the fire's warmth against his palms a comfort, and let the flames' dance guide his thoughts. In his mind, he saw Jerusalem as it had been in his youth, a city of bustling markets and golden domes, its streets alive with the hum of pilgrims and the scent of spices. He remembered his father, a trader, leading him through the souks, his hands guiding Gideon's through the barter, his voice humming a tune that echoed in the alleys. Those days had been before the Crusades, when Jerusalem had thrived, its peace a beacon for all who came. The breeze carried a soft crackle, and Gideon's memories deepened. He pictured a summer night 45 years past, when he had camped by this very spot with his family, the fire casting shadows on the olive trees. His wife, Leah, had stirred a pot of lentil stew, her hands steady, her laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves. Their son, Amos, a boy of 7, had poked sticks into the flames, his small voice asking tales of distant lands, his eyes aglow with wonder. The city had been their haven, the campfire a circle of warmth, its glow a promise of safety. The night grew quieter, the stars multiplying above, their light filtering through the branches to play on the embers. Gideon leaned back against his pack, the leather creaking softly, and thought of a winter evening when the Crusades had brought chaos to Jerusalem's gates. The soldiers had stormed the walls, their shouts a stark contrast to the village's calm, and his family had fled, seeking refuge in the hills. The market had burned, the souks silenced, and Amos had been lost in the flight. His laughter stilled, leaving Gideon with the road and the memory of that night. A gentle wind stirred the ashes, and Gideon's hand rested on the cup, its clay texture grounding him. He recalled a moment when the fire had guided a traveler to his camp. A man fleeing the Crusader roots, his face weary but kind. The night had been dark, the wind howling, and the flames had shone like a beacon, leading him to Gideon's side. They had shared bread and tales of a time before war, his voice blending with the wind, and Gideon had felt a connection to Amos. The fire a bridge to the past. The Crusades had scarred the land, but the campfire had endured, a constant amid the change. The moonlight shifted, casting shadows across the ground, and Gideon's breathing slowed, matching the fire's rhythm. He pictured Amos helping him gather wood, his small hands eager but clumsy, the soot staining his fingers as he giggled. He saw Leah weaving a mat by the flames, her hands steady, her voice humming a lullaby that had once filled their tent. The Crusades had taken them, their fates lost in the chaos, but the fire remained, its glow a testament to their love, a light that pierced the darkness of war. The night deepened, the breeze carrying a hint of dew, and Gideon pulled his cloak tighter. In his half-dream state, he saw Jerusalem as it had been, markets aglow with lamps, the city filled with song, Leah and Amos at his side. The Crusades faded, the soldiers' shouts replaced by the rustle of leaves, and the campfire thrived, the air filled with the scent of stew and bread. He walked the roads with his family, the flames lighting their path, the moon a witness to their joy. The owl hooted again, its sound blending with the wind, and Gideon's eyelids grew heavy. He pictured the fire burning brighter, its light a beacon for Leah and Amos to find their way home. The embers crackled softly, their presence a quiet chorus, and the tea cooled its final drop, a lullaby woven into the night. He felt the blanket beneath him, the cup against his hands, and the firelight became a cradle, guiding him deeper into rest. Sleep came gently, like the fall of an ember from the flame, carrying Gideon into a dream where the night never darkened. The city thrived, the fire glowed, and Leah and Amos returned, their laughter filling the camp. The Crusades were a distant memory. The stars sang, and the moonlight bathed him in peace, the campfire a guardian of his dreams as he drifted into a sleep as deep as the night's embrace.